All right. Call to order. Regular meeting of the Bloomfield Hills School Board of Education. Today's October 27, 2022. Trustee Matlow, please take attendance.
All board members are present.
All right, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to start the meeting with special recognition. Superintendent Watson.
All right, I'm honored to be here before you today to celebrate our prep students. Throughout the 21 and 22 school year, our prep students participated in a residency with world-famous artist Hubert Massey and renowned photographer S.K. Young, and collaborating in making a mural project that we have displayed here at Booth. As part of the residency, prep students were guided by Massey and Young in an art-seeking field trip where they were inspired by Detroit's rich art scene and learned elements of photography using their own phone cameras. With the assistance of the professional artists, the students they then used what they discovered to create multiple individual abstract work of art. The final project of the residency is a large mosaic mural. The incredible experience brought new skills and a deep understanding of local culture to the students in prep. The wonderful artists who guided us help expand both artistic horizons and open eyes to the idea that art is all around us and can be made from any medium. The mural is being unveiled this evening at the Board of Education meeting. Joining us tonight, Michael Gelnick, Executive Director of Michigan Arts Access, Laura Frankel, Outreach Coordinator for Michigan Arts Access, S.K. Young, our renowned photographer, representing our prep, Hubert is, there he is. Hubert Massey, our muralist. And then representing our prep staff, we have Lisa Brown, our transition coordinator, Megan Gornick, Tricia Carrick, and Nona Cleary. And with our students tonight, representing our student body is Jack Buckley. Okay. Jack, you want to come on up?
And we're just going to take one moment to get a group photo by the mural in the hallway if you guys also want to join us. Okay. All partners, teachers, Jack. Yeah.
You can send the bill. I'll just cross-charge it back to the district.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Small, and I'm an AP IB teacher at BHS. And can I please have Henry join me, please? I am honored to stand before you today to introduce and celebrate. I am honored to stand before you today and introduce and celebrate the extraordinary academic achievement of Henry Jackson, who earned a perfect raw score on his AP U.S. Government and Politics exam. Of all of the students around the world who took this challenging college-level examination, Henry is only one of 21 students worldwide who earned every possible point, placing him in the top 100th percentile. I am so very proud of him and beyond honored to have been his teacher. A few things that really stand out about Henry is that he was always attentive in class, asked real-world questions, exhibited resilience even when he did not receive that perfect score. But we won't mention that. And he was always growing as a learner. It takes hard work and dedication throughout the school year to achieve this level of success. It's also a very collaborative effort on behalf of his other teachers, family, and his own personal work ethic. Many congratulations to Henry for this impressive achievement, and the best luck in your future endeavors.
If the board wants to stand for the pictures, board can stand up.
Okay. Henry's taller than us, though. That's true. Here.
Here, Lisa, come on.
Come on.
Come on.
We are honored to stand before you today to celebrate current BHHS and IA students who are National Merit Scholarship semifinalists. Any of those students who are here with us tonight, if you would please rise and join me at the front. They take directions so well. Students who achieve National Merit semifinalist standing are awarded this recognition for testing in the top 1% nationally on their PSAT/NMSQT from October of their junior year. These students are eligible to compete for a $2,500 scholarship. Students who are selected as winners of the scholarship will be announced in May. All of these students have exemplary academic credentials, rigorous course loads, and outstanding extracurricular activities. Tonight, we are joined by the following BHHS students: Alexandria Baldy, Hayden Buckfire, Jacob Hirsch, Minglu Jing, Natalie Shimoni, and tonight we are joined by the following IA students: Tanae Dakarapu. Though they were unable to attend, we would also like to recognize VJ Data from BHHS, Alexander Hyatt from BHHS, Adit Jain from the IA, Nikhil Kothari from the IA, Eleanor Tupper from BHHS, William Zong from BHHS, and Dia Ramesh from the IA. When I call your name, if you'd come over and grab your certificate. Alexandria Baldy. Hayden Buckfire. Jacob Hirsch. Minglu Jing. Natalie Tishimoni. Tanae Dakarapu. VJ Data here. Alexander Hyatt. Adit Jain. Nikhil Kathari. Anyone else? One more tonight, sorry. That should be it tonight. We're ready for our picture. Go ahead.
So Lynn and Pat, if you join the students. And Catherine.
Yes. You want us to move down?
You moved it just slightly. If you guys want, it might be better just to stand right here. Yeah.
Okay, Michelle and Dan, John, down here, please. All right, everybody. I'm gonna take a couple, and then we're gonna let the families take a couple, all right? Thank you. Okay, families, if you'd like to stand up and take any pictures, go right ahead.
to celebrate our BHHS and IA students who achieved National Merit Commended status. So if those students are here, please come on up. Okay, students who achieve National Merit Commended status are awarded this recognition for testing in the top 3 to 4% nationally on their PSAT and MSQT from October of their junior year. All of these students have exemplary academic credentials, rigorous course loads, and outstanding extracurricular activities. Tonight, we are joined by the following BHHS students: Bowie Cooper, Jennifer Guan, Zaid Humayan, Henry Jackson, Gabriella Calabat, Lauren Kupelian, Ann Weaver. And the IA students who are with us this evening are Robert Salaji and Shreya Tandon. Do we want to work on, how do we want to do their certificates at that end? Sorry.
Maybe just recognize all the students who aren't here, and then we can give them certificates.
Okay, I think I went out of order. Sorry about that. Though they were unable to attend, we still want to make sure that we recognize the following students. There were 3 from BHHS, which include Elijah Cook, John McCalmont, and Leanne Obeid. And then 2 from the International Academy. That includes Charles Howard and Adnan Khan. Okay, so now when I call your name, please come and grab your certificate. Bowie Cooper, here. Jennifer Guan. Zaid Humayan. Henry Jackson. Gabriella Calabat. Lauren Kupelian. Ann Weaver. Robert Salaji. And Shreya Tandon.
I am honored to stand before you today to celebrate Rhea Tuzan, who earned a perfect score on AP 2D Art and Design exam. Of all the students around the world who took this challenging college-level examination, Rhea is one of just 197 students who earned every point possible. Art teacher Tessa Becerico, who unfortunately could not be here tonight, shares, Rhea was an active, outgoing presence in class with a very perceptive and sensitive ability to critique her peers and remain supportive as well as supported. Also, she was able to take critique without feeling criticized. All of these things make for a great learner and will help her in all of her future endeavors. Rhea graduated from BHHS in 2022 and is a current student at Johnson & Wales University in Providence, Rhode Island, studying baking. Today, Rhea's mother, Carrie, is here to accept this recognition on her behalf. Sure.
You can send it to her.
Wait, Beth, you want us to go in front and get the board in the back? We'll go right in front.
This is a big one. All right, John, come down. And then I'm gonna have you come down, and then, yes. Lisa, you come down. That looks great. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. All right. Hand couple. Well done, thank you.
In my spare time.
Nope.
Okay, number 3 on the agenda is administrative appointment. Superintendent Watson?
Jason, if you wouldn't mind, just come on up, please. So whenever the leadership position becomes available, the district conducts a wide search for candidates, including posting on the consortium, professional organizations, and utilizing social media. As a district, we also gather information and data from stakeholders to gain a better understanding of what we are looking for and what they are looking for in the position. I am pleased to share that after a rigorous interview process, Mr. Jason Ort will be joining BHS as our new associate principal starting Monday of next week. Mr. Ort comes to us from Avondale Middle School, where he has served as principal for the past 2 years. Before that, he spent 4 years as an assistant principal at Fraser High School, where he was nominated for the Michigan Association of Secondary School Assistant Principal of the Year Award. He also served as an assistant principal at Warren Woods Tower High School. Mr. Ort earned a bachelor's degree from Grand Valley State University, while also receiving a football scholarship and playing football at the collegiate level. He continued his education with a post-bachelor's certification in health education from Wayne State, earned a master's degree in educational leadership from Saginaw Valley State University, and also achieved a master's certificate in human resources management from Central Michigan University. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jason Ort.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited here to serve the board, the stakeholders, and the students. I was really thrilled having this opportunity, and I'm going to do something that a lot of first-time candidates don't do. I'm giving a shout-out to 3 people that have made this transition seamless for me. Miss Rebecca Cather, I'm going to say the name wrong, but she's amazing.
You say Rebecca, everyone knows.
Can we omit that from the record, please? Miss Karen Hughey and Miss Linda Swider. They have been such a blessing to when I'm trying to transition from my current job here. Those 3 people have made the communication seamless for me. So I'd like to recognize people that make my life easier, and those 3 people, thank you very much. And thank you for this opportunity. I can't wait to meet you all and back at the high school and watch me work. And your kids.
Well, it's a nice tie.
I was told that my last purple was not purple enough. So I darkened it up, and I feel like I belong now. So thank you.
I move that the Board of Education appoint Jason Ort as Associate Principal for Bloomfield Hills High School with an effective date of October 31st, 2022.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Beth, do you have those? comments?
Are there any other public comment cards that come in?
First, I will read our prepared statement. Public comment is an opportunity for the public to address the Board of Education. It is not a time for dialogue. In the interest of time, the Open Meetings Act provides that boards may place limits on the time allotment for an individual comment. In addition to making a public comment, you may also email the board at any time. Any comment that contains profanity, threats, defamatory remarks, or is directed at any person not employed by the district or a member of the Board of Education in their official capacity and related to the role and responsibilities for which they are employed or serve, or is otherwise exempt from First Amendment protection will be excluded from public comment. If you are speaking on behalf of a group or organization, please identify who you represent. Thank you for taking the time to address the BHS Board of Education. Today we'll do 3 minutes, Howard, it looks like. And we will start with Carrie Kamens and Cameron. Is it Carrie? Kari?
Hi, my name is Cameron Klein.
And my name is Carly Kamens, and we are co-presidents of the International Thespian Society.
We're here today to promote the theater department's current production of Disney's Newsies.
Newsies follows the story of the Newsies of New York as they strike when Joseph Pulitzer raises the price of newspapers.
Tickets are on sale now at bhs.ludus.com.
Our performance dates are November 17th, 18th, and we have 2 performances on the 19th.
Please come to support this amazing cast and crew.
2 weeks ago, we just finished our annual haunted theater where we completely transformed our theater into a full-blown haunted house. This year, we also had a friendly ghost tour, which was a much less scary version of the haunted house for children.
Next up for us is our trip to the Michigan Thespian Festival taking place on December 9th and 10th, where our students will be adjudicated and audition for college scholarships.
Again, please come and support Newsies.
We all love it when teachers or board members become involved with our program. In fact, 2 teachers, Mr. Genvy and Mrs. Toomey, are a part of our current production.
We hope to see all the board members there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carly and Cameron. Next up, Phil.
Hello, my name is Phil Liberty. As many of you might know, I've taught history at the high school level in this district for the last 17 years. And for the last 4 years, I've been the president of the Bloomfield Hills Education Association. What you might not know is that I began my career here at BHS at the International Academy. As I was finishing up my education degree, I was a math graduate assistant for a couple of years there. And it's at that school, at the International Academy, where I learned what it was to be a teacher in Bloomfield Hills, the expectations that my students have for me, the community has for me, my administrators have of me, and what I should have of myself. I witnessed firsthand the dedication and passion for learning that both students and staff exhibited at that school. I quickly learned that districts across the state of Michigan looked upon the IA as an exemplar for what they wanted to create in their own districts. Now, the reason I bring this up today is that our district is in an unprecedented situation. My International Academy members are currently working without a labor agreement. This is, to the best of my knowledge, has never happened before in the history of Bloomfield Hills schools. Never. I'm afraid that this situation, left unchecked, is becoming untenable, can create instability, and needs to be resolved at the earliest possible moment. Tonight, you'll hear from a few of my AA members who will provide additional context and story around the situation. I implore you to listen to them, to take in what they're saying, and to do whatever each of you can do to help solve this issue. I've worked with every one of you on solving very, very difficult issues in the past, and I'm sure that this is one that we can get by as well, that we can figure out. Additionally, if anything that's brought up tonight leads to you having questions, concerns, additional information that you would like, as always, I'm available for individual conversations or whatever have you. to answer those questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Roger?
Hello, good evening, Bloomfield Hills School Board. I'm Roger Wynn, a chemistry teacher at International Academy. Thank you for giving me the time to speak to you about our current situation. As a current teacher and former International Baccalaureate diploma recipient, I know firsthand the benefits of an IB education can give you and the additional rigors for both students and teachers. The aim of the IB program is to develop international-minded people who recognize their common humanity and shared guardianship of the planet to help create a better world. One of the 10 attributes the IB program encourages to achieve this aim is for our students to be principled, to act with integrity and honesty with a strong sense of fairness and justice, which is what brings us here as International Academy teachers to speak tonight. For the first time in our school's history, we have been working under an expired letter of understanding. The letter of understanding covers differences between the International Academy and Bloomfield Hills School District, such as our extended school year and school day, and compensation for such additional time. Since June 30th, 2022, our letter of understanding has been expired. Even though we have been negotiating since April, there has been no real movement on economic compensation. Only once in the International Academy's history has there been an increase in the stipend for extra time worked. We are here as IA teachers to speak about what wonderful options the International Academy brings to the Bloomfield Hills School District and how the lack of a letter of understanding is affecting us as teachers and as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Alex?
Hello, Board. My name is Alex Benitez, and I have worked at the International Academy as a history and government teacher for 8 years now. I am here to tell you why the International Academy is an amazing place for students here in Bloomfield Hills. Over the years, as you may know, the IA has racked up some pretty impressive accomplishments. In fact, just this year, Niche Rankings named the International Academy the #1 public high school in Michigan. On top of that, over the years, U.S. News and World Report has consistently ranked our school as one of the best in the country. Every year, our students achieve the International Baccalaureate diploma on top of their high school diploma at a higher rate than the world average. However, what sets our school apart is not the ranking or the statistics. In fact, it is the IA teachers who develop a special bond with our students through the challenges of the IB program. We work through extended essays and internal assessments outside of our normal classwork with students. We wait for them in the hallways after they complete their 6 different subject exams, each comprising of 3 different components. It's anywhere from 18 to 24 hours of testing that our students do. We sponsor their 40 different clubs and countless extracurriculars that build our school community. We write their letters of recommendation that help them get into the most prestigious schools across the country. The International Academy provides a unique educational experience like no other. My colleagues are incredible professionals, and we have been doing all of this year without a letter of understanding. We are incredible professionals, and we deserve to be treated as such. The IA is a special place, and we are proud to have it here in Bloomfield Hills. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alex. Nick?
Hello, good evening. My name is Nicholas Kruger, and this is my 2nd year as an IA teacher. I would like to shift gears a little bit and mainly speak about the numbers behind what we are asking for as IA teachers. It is easy to misunderstand this issue as being about only money when it is not. IA teachers work, on average, about 19 additional days per year, and I can break that down a little bit more for you. These extra days are a combination of an extended school year as well as a longer contractual school day. For reference, IA teachers work a total of 192 teacher days. This is 6 days longer than the Bloomfield Hills school year of 186 teacher days. We also teach a total of 190 student days, which is 9 days longer than the Bloomfield Hills student school year of 181 days. We also have, in general, a longer school day, period. To accommodate for these differences, IA teachers are offered a stipend. Our current stipend, through the Letter of Understanding, pays IA teachers, on average, an hourly rate of about $19 an hour for this extra time. This is grossly under the per diem rate that a BH teacher would receive who worked in any other building besides the International Academy. We understand that the district has also received a $450 per pupil increase through the foundation allowance. And so we know that the cost to the district for fairly compensating IA teachers for their extended school day and year would be minimal. Please understand that we are not simply asking for more money. We are asking to be fairly compensated for our time, the same way that any other Bloomfield Hills teacher would be. Our current compensation is unsustainable, and this is reflected by the shocking amount of teacher turnover at International Academy. Please help solve this crisis in an equitable way now, so that we can confidently engage in our profession, knowing that our district values us and the work that we do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nick. Nicole?
Bonsoir, good evening. My name is Nicole Senator. I live in Oxford, and I am a teacher at the International Academy. My contract is through Bloomfield Hills, and I have worked at the Oakmeyer Central Campus since August 2010. I'm a mother of 3 beautiful children, and as an IA teacher and as a parent, I'm here to talk about the financial challenges that come from an extended IA calendar. As you will hear and have already heard from several of my colleagues tonight, IA teachers are currently working both a longer school day and longer school year when compared to teachers working in any of the other Bloomfield Hills buildings. For me, this requires after-school care for my 2 oldest who are in elementary school. After-school care in Oxford costs $24 a day, which is more than the average rate of $19 an hour an IA teacher has traditionally received for their extended calendar and school day. I have also had to pay for my 2 older children to attend summer camps for the combined 4 weeks that they are on summer break and I am still working. On top of that, I also have to pay additional daycare fees for my youngest, who is in a traditional daycare as an infant. All told, the amount I have to pay in this additional childcare for all 3 of my children costs significantly more than the current amount of my stipend. For those extra days each year, I am paying to work at the IA. Ever since I was hired, I have felt extremely lucky to be part of the Bloomfield Hills family of teachers. Over this past summer in particular, I was just bragging to my friends about being a Bloomfield Hills educator. I told them how Bloomfield Hills respects and treats their teachers fairly, as seen in our newest Bloomfield Hills Education Association contract. I shared that I have seen Pat Watson visit my school and my classroom so much more than any other superintendent that I've worked with for. And that includes in 4 other school districts. I am proud to be a Bloomfield Hills teacher, and I am very proud to teach at the International Academy. I just wish that the IA were treated as equitably as Bloomfield Hills teachers would be for an extended calendar and an extended school day.
Thank you, Nicole. Brad?
Hello, school board. My name is Brad Davies. I'm a Berkeley resident, and this is my 24th year teaching at the International Academy. I'd like to continue some of the conversation that Mr. Kruger started earlier today, and I want to talk about teacher turnover. The IA has been experiencing a large amount of teacher turnover, and as a result, we have lost decades worth of institutional knowledge these past year, 2 years. Institutional knowledge tells us what we do and why. It is the living values of our community. And naturally, these values change over time, but at present, the teacher turnover is growing at a point where I'm concerned that we will no longer understand what we stand for. The letter of understanding of the past, along with the absence of a current letter of understanding with proportionate pay for proportionate work, is contributing to this turnover. I have lost friends to positions within this district, to positions within another district, or to occupations completely outside of education as they've been headhunted away. But before I continue, I want to tell you I'm really excited with this new batch of teachers that we have hired. They have an energy and a passion that is aligning with what we're trying to do at the IA and what we stand for, and they're also contributing new ideas as well, and I don't want to lose them. So now we start the process of mentoring them and getting them up to speed with the culture of the IA and also of the IB. The IB brings it with it its own jargon and style of assessment. And so for our students, we need to make sure that the new teachers understand the ins and outs of the program so the students are getting a fair but rigorous education that they're seeking through the IB. To lose a new hire after a year of mentoring, and I'm mentoring in 2 different departments, means additional time away from my own students' needs, whether it's refining a lesson or developing a new lesson, setting up a lab, or giving feedback to a student on their paper. To lose all that work again and again is disheartening, to say the least. So I'm asking for the school board's help today. For the sake of the students, please help us resolve the letter of understanding in such a way that teachers feel valued and we can reinvigorate our IA community. Thank you for your time and listening.
Thank you, Brad. Christy?
Good evening. My name is Christy Hessler. I have been both an International Academy and Bloomfield Hills teacher for 15 years. As International Academy teachers, we are dedicated to the program and believe it helps students become lifelong learners with a deep, holistic understanding in six subjects and very well prepared for the rigors of college. As you know, Bloomfield Hills School District's mission statement focuses on equity for students. As International Academy teachers, we would like to be compensated for our work at a fair and equitable rate. I love what I do, honestly love what I do, and I love working for Bloomfield Hills. I'm here tonight to communicate my concerns and those of my colleagues about currently teaching without a letter of understanding. Furthermore, I am asking the Bloomfield Hills School District, as a consortium member, to resolve the current situation and do what you can to help us get a fair and equitable letter of understanding. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Christy. Move on to 5, which is President's Report. Let's see what I've got today. Some positive things in the district. Our Deaf and Hard of Hearing program has offered American Sign Language classes to Oakland County bus drivers with an emphasis on greeting signs, conversational signs, and emergency signs. Our 3 middle schools sent about 42 athletes to the Oakland County meet at Cranbrook, where 225 athletes from 16 middle schools competed, and one of our middle school girls won the race, Olivia Carlson from EHMS, and the boys had a 3rd and 7th place finish. Colin Hunt from EHMS and Carter Hartfield from BHMS. The BHS girls hockey team finished the regular season 16-1, making it all the way to the state quarterfinals, where they lost a heartbreaker to Saline 2-1. The IA juniors logged more than 1,300 hours of service learning at the Children's Center and Downtown Boxing Gym in Detroit, as well as Forgotten Harvest Farm in Fenton. BHS students who are legacy members of the East Hills First Robotics Team, GEKOT, is that how they say it? Do you know?
Where is
right
it?
Here.
Oh,
Gekit.
yeah.
And owners in Gekit Inc. received exciting news that their company was awarded a $70,000 grant from the state of Michigan. The students invented a collision avoidance safety technology for electronic scooters, which now has an improved patent application and is being developed further through a collaboration with the engineering school at Oakland University and industry leader Razor USA. Finally, I didn't think I'd ever have to address this, but the race for school board has gotten fairly contentious with attack ads, blogs, and social media posts. I just want everyone to keep in mind that the 10 community members that are running for school board are running for volunteer positions that are nonpartisan, and it takes a lot of time and effort to run. a lot of time and effort to be on the board, and it's disheartening to see fellow community members' names and reputations dragged through the mud and painted in an unfair light by individuals and organizations. Pat? Number 6, Superintendent's report.
Thank you. So October is National Principals Month, so I would like to thank all of our amazing school principals for all they do to support our community and our learners every day. Next week, on November 2nd, from 4:30 to 6 p.m., I'll be at the Bloomfield Township Library. It's an opportunity to engage with parents and students. I'll be reading books about thankfulness and about cooperation. So regardless of whether you have children still in school or not, you are more than welcome to come out and attend. We'll also have the opportunity to do some crafts. This was an event that we hosted with the Township Library as part of the collaboration we had with them that went really, really well. The Farm and Nature Center have embarked on a strategic plan and master planning. As part of the process, they are seeking feedback from community members. The survey can be found on our website, and the survey will close on October 31st. Recently, we had over 100 representatives from universities, community colleges, trade schools, and the military that attended our college night at Bloomfield Hills High School with the idea of providing opportunities for students in multiple venues so they have an idea of what could be available after they graduate from high school. Also recently, 7 of our high school students were invited as VIP members to an event with Vice President Harris regarding civic engagement and civic conversation. And our students were, as a district, we were well represented. There were very few spots. We were very fortunate to have 7 of those. Congratulations to our Bloomfield Hills High School varsity tennis team. They went into the Michigan High School Athletic Association state tournament as the #1 ranked team in the state of Michigan. They left as state champions, I believe second time in 4 years, if I'm correct, with a total of 35 points. Tomorrow at Bloomfield Hills High School, we are hosting our first open house. This is kind of new for us this year at the high school. It will consist of small group tours for middle school families to see our incredible facilities. They'll have the opportunity to meet with Principal Strouder and other administrators and counselors as part of our new program. And lastly, we had a very successful Safety Week last week, which included a community conversation event at Bloomfield Hills High School. I know for a lot of people, they were unable to attend. The recording is now on our website, and there's a lot of valuable information, so I would encourage everyone to be there. We also had quite a few representatives from the 3 police departments and the fire departments as well, just in regards to the collaboration we have regarding safety within our schools. Thank you, President Van Gemert.
Thank you, Superintendent Watson. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Secretary Matlow.
Okay. I move that the Board of Education approve the recommendations detailed in the consent agenda as follows. Request to approve minutes from the regular meeting and closed session of September 22nd, 2022. Request to approve minutes from the closed session and study session of October 6th, 2022. Request to approve disbursement reports submitted by Tina Kostiuk, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations. I move that the Board of Education approve the disbursement reports as presented. Request to approve monthly financial reports submitted by Tina Kostiuk, Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations. I move that the Board of Education approve the financial reports as presented. Request to approve annual summer tax resolution submitted by Tina Kostiuk, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations. I move that the Board of Education adopt the attached resolution to collect summer property taxes on property located within the school district. Request to approve backhoe replacement from Jacob McDermott, Director of Physical Plant Services. I move the board approve the purchase of a 2022 case wheel loader from Southeastern Equipment Company with a total cost of $114,488.81. This is replacing our current JCB wheel loader that has been deemed unrepairable. This is a My Deal consortium bid purchase and will be funded by the Capital Equipment Fund. And finally, request to approve HR actions submitted by Keith McDonald, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. I move that the Board of Education approve the personnel actions as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. We will move on to 8, which is special reports. A is the annual financial audit presentation with Laura Clays and Casey Eaton. Sorry.
You want to do it from the PowerPoint or the PDF, or doesn't it matter?
It doesn't matter
Which do you like driving?
Let's
easier?
do
The PDF or the PowerPoint?
the PDF.
Okay.
That way we don't have to worry about any issues.
That's fine, no worries. So we just need to present. Okay, so you just go ahead and present. Do you know how to do present? There we go. And then you're just going to use the arrows.
Perfect, thank you. Good evening. My name is Laura Clays. I'm very pleased to be here this evening to present the June 30, 2022 audit report to you as the Board of Education. With me today is Casey Eason, who had primary responsibility for the audit, and she'll be covering some of the slides with you today. Included in your board packet, you received a copy of the basic financial statements, which is titled the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, as well as the Federal Program Report and a report to the Board of Education. Let's talk about a few of the key audit highlights before we get into some of those numbers. So first, as we talk about the basic audit or that annual financial comprehensive report, the district once again received an unmodified opinion. As you know, and as we've talked about in the past, that's the highest form of assurance that you can receive from an outside audit organization. And that means that based on our audit work, which looks at your controls, it looks at transactions, and we confirm items with outside parties, that we don't have any changes made to those financial numbers in order for them to be presented in accordance with the audit regulations. So congratulations to all of you, and certainly to the business department on receiving that recognition. Also, what we look at is whether you have any violations of the Uniform Budgeting Act. So as you know, you have to adopt a budget at the beginning of the year, prior to the end of your fiscal year, going into the next year, and then you amend that throughout the year. And what we look at is budget to actual variances, and the state of Michigan also looks at that as well. We found no violations with the Uniform Budgeting Act. And that tells us that the district is paying attention to what's happening throughout the year, certainly as things change at the state and federal level, and as your finances change, you're amending that along the way to make sure that you know what's happening. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. As it relates to the federal programs, as you can see on the screen, this year we audited the Education Stabilization Fund, and sometimes you'll hear that referred to as ESSER, and I know you have a presentation about that later. And so when we did our audit work there, we have no findings and no question costs. So as a board member or community member, that's what you're looking to see as to whether you followed the federal regulations. So congratulations on that achievement as well. As you know, those funds are new. The federal regulations change. They change all the time. And so it would be very easy not to have compliance because the rules all change, but you did a very nice job of keeping track of that, and the finance team keeps on top of that on a regular basis. And we'll talk about the magnitude of those dollars in just a moment. And then finally, we look at your capital projects compliance. You've had a significant amount of construction under your bond programs, and you are required to spend those dollars in accordance with the ballot language that you went to the community to get approval on. So we look at that, and we do have a comment in our audit report every year that you are in compliance with those ballot language items. So again, an item for adherence, and you did follow those rules, so congratulations. And then finally, a very large congratulations. You did receive the 2021 ASBO Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting for the 22nd year. And really what that does is it has an introductory section and a tremendous amount of statistical information that you're used to seeing year in and year out. But you are one of a very few number of districts in the state of Michigan that provide that information as supplemental data to your community members. And what that does is it gives an enhanced level of reporting and transparency as to what the district is doing, what your goals are, and certainly provides a lot of historical information, which helps you in the event that you need to go out for bond funding, and certainly when others are looking at you and looking at the finance of the district. So that's a tremendous award. We're pleased to know that you received that again, and congratulations to Tina Kostiuk, Karen Hildebrandt, and the entire finance department on receiving that award. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Casey for a minute to take you through some of the financial highlights.
Thank you. So this first slide here that I'm covering is a deeper dive into the COVID relief funding. As Laura mentioned, and as most of you know, the district has received a significant amount of emergency relief and response federal grant funding over the past few years. What this graph is doing is providing an overview of the time horizon in which these emergency COVID-related grants will affect the district, and as you can see, we're currently in the middle of it. So what this is showing is on the left-hand side, it provides the individual COVID-related grants. This is not a comprehensive list, but does include the most significant ones, including the ESSER ones that Laura mentioned that we tested as part of our single audit. Depicted in blue is the total known award amount. Underneath that in orange shows what has been spent to date through June 30th, 2022. And for a perspective on the timing, we've also presented the grant period so you can see when these funds must be expended by. So in fiscal year 2022, 78% of your total federal revenue came from your recurring legacy grants. Those would be the special ed, the title grants, the child nutrition grants that you're used to seeing, with the remainder coming from these COVID grants. This slide is really shown to remind you that this is a finite funding source for the district, and it does have a cliff on when you can spend these funds. And there are strings attached to these funds, which is what we look at as part of our single audit, with more restrictions and stipulations put on the ESSER 3 awards. So while it's been a significant benefit to the district for these fundings, it really has been important for you to have a strategic plan in place on the spending and not burden the district with any long-term alterations to your cost structure. Also illustrated on this grant at the top, you can see the total amount awarded versus what's been expended to date, and around 89% of these funds have already been spent. So flipping to the next slide, I'm going to take a dive into some financial overviews of the general fund, since that's the main operating fund of the district. This first slide here is looking at revenue and other sources. Just keeping in mind, we auditors are historians, so this is for activity for the year ended June 30th, 2022. Local source revenue makes up 36.8% of the total of $101.3 million, and the local revenue is primarily your property tax revenue. State revenue is coming in at 50.6% and is the largest component of your total revenue. This includes your foundation allowance, which is your per pupil funding, as well as categoricals. Also included in this state total is $9.3 million the district receives monthly that is a pass-through that's required to get turned around and paid right back to the state for the retirement. So the district gets that money and then is required to pay it back, so they really have no control over what those funds can be used for. Federal revenue, so this is up slightly from prior year, around $1 million, and that's largely due to what we just talked about, all of the ESSER grants getting spent down. Last category is inter-district transfers and others. The largest piece of this is the Act 18 distributions from Oakland schools and then some other miscellaneous revenue. So next slide is taking a look at general fund expenditures. And the first slide we're going to look at is breaking them down by function code. So more looking at it at a department level or where the district is spending the money. Total expenditures came in at $103.6 million. Majority of the expenditures, as expected, are spent on instruction, instructional support, and pupil services. That was 73% of the total, which is a slight increase from prior year, showing there's more money being spent in the classroom. But if you look at these departmental-wise, all the expenditures are in alignment from prior year. So if you were to take out all of the numbers and just look at the pie slice compared to last year, you wouldn't really be able to tell a difference. Flipping one slide further, we're going to take a look at those same expenditures we just looked at, but this is breaking it down by object code, or how the district is spending the money in the departments we just discussed. As expected here as well, the majority of these expenditures are getting spent on salaries and benefits, approximately 83.3%, which is almost the same percentage as last year, a little bit higher. Last year was 82.1%, and that's consistent with the statewide average of what we would see districts spending on personnel costs. As a reminder, the $9.3 million we talked about previously with talking about revenue, that's included in that employee benefits number, so that's where that's recorded. Also consistent with the prior year slide, these percentages and the graph as a whole look very similar to prior year. There's been no significant fluctuations. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Laura, who's going to go into detail more on the fund balance and have some closing comments.
Great. Thank you. So just to summarize the results for the entire year, this shows really where you began the year, June 30, 2021, and where you ended the year, June 30, 22. So you started the year with $22.5 million of fund balance. You had the revenue that Casey talked about at $101.3 million, and the expenditures of $103.6. So you had a decline in your fund balance of $2.3 million. The final amended budget that you adopted just prior to June 30, 2022 anticipated a $2.9 million reduction in fund balance. So it came in better than expected, but you did plan on a reduction in utilization of your fund balance. So you ended the year with $20.1 million worth of fund balance. And as we've talked about in the past, that has several components to it. So you'll see that listed on the bottom. The non-spendable fund balance of $341,000, those are dollars that you've already spent prepaying for an insurance policy, things along those lines. Those dollars have already been spoken for. The next line item is assigned of $402,000, and that is looking at the budget that you adopted prior to June 30, 22, but for fiscal year 23, and you had planned at that point in time for a utilization of fund balance of $402,000. Now, as you know, as you go through the year and as things change, you will amend your budget, but that's what we know right now at this point in time, so you've already spoken for those dollars. And the remaining amount, after you take out those two elements, is what's called your unassigned fund balance of $19.4 million. And we often look at that in terms of what is that as a percentage of your fund balance. It's about 18.9%, which is in alignment with your fund balance policy. The one thing I do want to point out, and I talked about a little bit in my opening comments, is that budget to actual variance that we look at. There's always going to be a variance. Nothing is always perfect. But when we look at the variance that you had between what you expected to do and what you actually finished, the variance is less than 0.5%. So it goes back to the comment that I made before, that you're on top of what's happening, the amendments are being done on a regular basis, and you're keeping track of how the funds are utilized. Next couple of slides really will talk about our, we've talked about this in the past, the retirement expense, which really Casey talked about a few moments ago. And what we thought would be helpful to show you and the community is just the trend of what's happened from 2013 through 2022. As we know, the retirement costs continue to increase. You don't have any control over how dollars are invested at the state level, and they tell you what your retirement contribution percentage will be. So if you look on the far right side for 2022, the net rate, so those are the dollars that the district pays as the employer, is 28.23% of salary costs. The gross rate is 43.28%. That delta are the dollars that Casey was talking about, where the state gives you the money, you give it back to them, and that's how those obligations are funded, by them channeling the money to the district and then back to the state. But the net out-of-pocket cost to the district is $16.2 million for this past year. And that is not including the dollars that employees have to pay as their own self-contribution. So it's an item to watch. The retirement plan actually had a very good investment return for their year end, and that's what's going on in the market, but that was as of September 30th, 2021. So we all have seen what's happened in the market lately. That will get measured again right now, September 30, 2022, and that affects the rate of return and it affects the contribution rate going forward. So we'll continue to keep you updated on that front. So in closing, we just wanted to indicate the district does continue to operate very fiscally soundly. There's a lot of communication amongst the the district and the school board to make sound decisions for what's best, not only for today, but also for the longevity and the fiscal stability of the district going forward. And we commend you for taking that long-term view, because it would be very easy to make short-term decisions, and once you utilize that fund balance, it is very, very difficult to recoup and rebuild again. So we commend you for the view that you've taken so far. And as I mentioned, that does take a lot of collaboration and a lot of communication, and we encourage all of our school districts to continue to do that, because that will be so important going forward. The state has substantial funds today, but we've also seen when they haven't had them in the past, and so keep monitoring what's happening at the state level so you'll know what will happen with that foundation allowance. And then, as Casey mentioned, as those emergency dollars dissipate, you will need to decide whether the programs that those funded and the expenditures they funded, how will those continue to be funded in the future if they had more of a long-term nature associated with them. So we just continue to encourage you to keep your eye on that. And with that, we do want to thank you for the opportunity to serve as the auditors for the district, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening.
Just a quick question, second to last pie chart.
Oh, pie chart, yep.
What is the difference between school administration and general administration?
Yeah, those are classifications that are distributed by the state of Michigan. So school administration typically encompasses individuals that are in the managerial type levels within the buildings. They have building level costs. It doesn't mean just the principal or assistant principal. It includes all the administrators, how the state tells us to code that, and Tina can likely speak to that more fully than I can. General administration might include some operational administration, business administration here in this building, other administrators that are not specifically located in a school building. Did they catch that right, Tina? Okay, great.
Does, say, electricity and light for any building, does that fall under operations or school administration?
That typically falls under operations.
Thank you.
Howard?
I have a number of questions, so if other people want to break in, I'll go through a few and then stop and let other people go. So on the ESSER slide.
Okay.
And some of this is going to be for Plant Moran, and some of it's going to be for Tina. Would it be possible for me as a board member, if my other board members are interested, to get the details of the $3.9 million on the 11T?
Absolutely. So in board updates over the last few years, as we've been receiving ESSER funds, there's more detail that I've provided, including more of this one-time funding.
But I think you've given us a lot of updates on the ESSER 3 going backwards, but it's the ESSER 3 that the rules kind of just came out over the last number of months, I think.
Now, ESSER, ESSER 3, the 11th, that
The
would have been
equalization.
in the spring.
The equalization.
Yep, in the spring. So we did
Okay.
have an update on that, and I'm happy to include in the next board update more detail on exactly what that was.
Because as we go into the presentation we're going to get to in a little bit by Todd, because these dollars are the actuals as opposed to what Todd's going to be presenting, I think, is for 2022-23 school year. Am I right?
That is correct. What Todd is presenting is a requirement specific to this year's school aid budget, and it's a specific section that required a presentation about learning loss. That application is not actually due until the end of November, but we were required to do a presentation by October 30th, so Todd will be doing that. And that is not, there are actually ESSER $2 that the state received, and now the state has allocated in this section 98C, which Todd will be presenting about. So those dollars are not reflected there. You are correct.
So is any of the ESSER 3 equalization 11T, is any of that for learning loss, or was that all for remediation and other COVID-related issues?
There are more details, so I can't answer that with all of the, I have to put that in the board
We can do it
update.
offline.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would rather be accurate.
So now, don't leave, Tina. So looking through the food service.
Yes.
Food service had a significant amount of increase in its fund balance this year, $900,000, taking us to a total balance of about $1.5 million in food service. So question there is, one, why was that increase so large? Was that COVID related?
It's COVID related, and it actually wasn't just this year, it was last year as well. So for a couple of years, I guess you could say it's a good problem to have, but all of the funding that came to provide the free meals and based on the meals provided, that's really what increased fund balance. Now this year, everything is going back to normal or pre-COVID, and meals are not free. And so some of that we expect now to dwindle. It's not going to be building up anymore, but that is primarily why it increased.
I figured. So I know the state has a limit in terms of how large the food service budget or fund balance can be. And number one, what is that, or are we close to that tipping point that MDE is going to get involved with us? And what are our plans to spend like $1.5 million? That's a lot of money within food service. We only spend about $3 million a year in total.
Yes, we're in communication with MDE, and actually, it is in the letter that Laura will mention.
Well, I read the letter. I've got it right here.
Yeah, so included in our letter to the Board of Education, that was one of the items that we highlighted to keep an eye on, and Howard has it and has it highlighted. So you are only allowed to have a certain amount of fund balance, and they look at it as a 3 months worth of your expenditures, and they recognize that the school is on a 9-month tuitional year, a school year, not a 12-month calendar year or fiscal year. So what ends up happening is the state may contact you and say, what's your plan? And your team already has a plan. And oftentimes that may be upgrading the facilities, that might be changing the cost of meals for students. There is a plan that they just want to know that you have one. Where they get involved is where there is no plan.
What I'm wondering from Ms. Kostiuk is, what is our plan?
Well, some of the plan, I can tell you, is looking at the equipment replacement. So we've been fortunate in how the food service financially has been positive even before COVID, and that's allowed us not to use the general fund or other monies for anything related to food service. So now taking a fresh look at all of the equipment that's going to be needed, that is an allowable cost. So that is a significant part of the plan.
Okay.
And more will be in a future board update too once we iron that out with MDE.
Thank you. I have more, but anyone else want to ask any questions? Okay. The management letter. First, I would really recommend to my fellow board members, you don't have to necessarily go through all the detail of the annual financial report. Only people like Paul and myself who are beanies can really appreciate it. But the management letter is wonderful. It gives a great overview of not only the finances, but the revenues and the state revenues coming in, both for the current year and the future year. It's really wonderful and very well done, so thank you very much, and I'd really recommend everyone. It's about 20 pages, but it's well worth your time. In that management letter, and again, this is some of the beanie stuff, I do see that the modified accrual is being considered to be changed, where instead of the 60-day rule that Tina is sitting there smiling and laughing, the 60-day rule is being considered to go to a year. How wonderful.
Yes. Howard, did you put them up to that?
I have my contacts. So, but is that, how quickly is that GASB going to be possibly put into place to allow Tina to actually have a reasonable way of doing things as opposed to after August cutting off?
So if everything goes according to plan, and we do identify this in the letter, because your district has revenues in excess of $75 million, that would be required to be implemented in June 30, 2025. So there's a little bit more time.
So we're still talking about 3 years from now?
Yes.
And I did notice that GASB's current work plan anticipates the new standards could be issued by 2027. They certainly, it's like watching paint dry.
No comment.
Continuing on. Could you go 2 slides forward, please? There you go. The kind of mustard color there, which is very similar to the dress code today, it says that for instruction, instructional support, and pupil services, about 73% of our expenditures. Is that in line with what other districts spend? Are we higher, lower? Any idea?
It's hard to tell, and I'd say you're in line with other districts, but the question that we normally get asked is this next one, in terms of when we look at how dollars are spent, how much is spent on salaries and benefits.
That's not my question, though.
I
So if you can
understand
go-
that, but that's the one that most people look to, that I'm more confident in saying, yes, you're in alignment. So relative to departmental, I
The
can't
reason
tell.
why I'm bringing this up, and I'll bring up something else in a second, there has been a lot of discussion in the school board race related to how much we spend on student instruction. And I'm just trying to understand a little bit, maybe if you've got some statistics back in the office, you can look to see whether are we, having too much, are we too top-heavy in our building, in our district cost and spending too much on our administration? Or is that 73, my feeling is that 73% is consistent with other districts, but I'd like to have people who have more of a broad view of other districts to give me some idea on that. So thank you so much for that.
And if I may, Howard?
Yes, ma'am.
Because we have to follow the state chart of accounts and how things are coded, it's up to a certain place, actually in greater detail than years and years ago. But there is sometimes disparity on how districts interpret where to charge things. So while I think this is consistent, it's important to point out that the mustard color includes in the classroom instruction, instructional services or support and pupil services. Some of those things are also outside the classroom, like speech therapists. So we look at all of that as instructional services for the students, but the chart of accounts, sometimes what is being discussed in public is just in classroom instruction. So there are a lot of different ways to interpret and to look at things. So I'm just saying that sometimes it's difficult to compare one district to another. There is a lot of data that is out on not only CEPI and My School data, but there are also some bulletins that compare the percentages for exactly these categories. I have those, and usually they're available about 9 months after year end for that particular school year. So it'll be easy to show you, but until you dig into the details, and you were part of that over a decade ago with Karen and I.
Remember it well.
Yes, so.
So I'm just saying that instruction is a real subset of what it takes to really run a building, and having all the counselors and the social workers and all the other support services, that it's more than just what is physically within a little rectangle of a classroom. I think Todd and Pat, being administrators of buildings, would appreciate that. Also, I think go forward to the profit and loss. So we have a $2.3 million expense over revenue. Is that abnormal? Is that something like historically, how have we done as a district in terms of, have we been running losses year after year after year?
So I'm taking notes for the next board update. One of the things that I've provided before is a historical picture going all the way back to, I think, the year 2000 of the total revenue, the total expenditures, the change in fund balance. Sometimes what impacts this is not having great matching. So the 60-day rule you mentioned, for instance. And so that has impacted different years.
So there could be timing year to year like that.
Yes, especially with the COVID funding.
I happen to have done a little bit of homework during the afternoon. For the last 7 years cumulative, we're basically plus $800,000. So the fact that we have a $2.3 million loss this year, or cost over expenditure this year, if you go back over a number of years, because you said the matching of expense and revenues, especially with Section 18 expenditures, I think that's coming from Oakland School.
Sometimes that happens, but really these last few years with COVID funding, it's been a mix.
Yeah.
It's looking at all 3 to 4 fiscal years all at once. So I will provide that again, because we often look at 3-year, 5-year, and greater averages of how we've done.
Okay.
So, Trustee Barron, I'm just going to remind you that this is a presentation of the audit and not a budget discussion.
I'm going based
Right,
upon the
you're
audit
using, I was speaking, you're using the presentation of the audit to get to you what you want to talk about when it comes to the
I'm
budget.
talking about financial information in this district, sir.
Can I interject? I do have a question.
Sure.
So I'm done with my questions. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I do have a question looking. So there was looking at the report. Oh, sorry. There was a comment, and I'm just curious on this comment in the report. In order to optimize available, this is on page 12 for my colleagues. In order to optimize available funding, address learning and operational needs, plan for the future, and ensure compliance with federal rules and regulations, the school district should consider the following. And you have 5 bullet points. Obtain a clear understanding of program requirements, including allowable uses and the time period in which eligible expenses must be incurred, some of which are modified by the American Rescue Plan. Update and maintain procedures and internal controls to adhere to uniform guidance, rules related to procurement, cash management, incorporate MDE guidelines, document all decisions. So is there a message in there? I'm curious in terms of those comments.
No, there's not. So we provide that because so much funding changes on a regular basis for all school districts in the state of Michigan. We provide that as a reminder to stay on point with what you've been doing. As I talked about before, when we've done our testing, when we look at things, we don't find that you're violating the rules. When part of our role is to make sure that what you say you do, you've documented. So we test that. We had no issues there. So great question. We are not sending you a hidden message at all. It's really a reminder.
Because getting, to Trustee Barrett, so I guess a question that has come up from our community is the additional funding we received, making sure we used it and we were in compliance. So that's not a message that we weren't, right?
That is correct. And really, as a community member or board member, the best way to know that, especially this year because we did test that education stabilization or those ESSER dollars, is the very last page of your audit or your report that says the federal program audit. You want to have as few words on that page as possible. And so where it talks about financial statement findings, it says none. When it talks about federal program findings, it says none. And it also says we tested that program, so that tells you there's no issues.
Okay, thank you.
But realize also, Mr. Cohen, that what the auditors are looking for is making sure we're compliant to the rules. But then that's why I asked for more details so that we can understand, yes, it might be within the rules, but is it something that we, the board, would agree to in terms of the best use of funds?
Right, and I'm sorry, Howard, I didn't mean to make it argumentative. I just meant that that's type of discussion is what we discuss when we discuss the budget, not when we discuss the
But that'll
audit.
be 6 months from now, and I won't even be on the board, sir. So I think it was an
So
opportunity
you're going to hijack our time
talk
to-
about these
okay.
kind of things that I think are all financially related.
Thank you, Laura and Casey. Does anyone else have any relevant questions?
Is this the time to go over the annual
Microphone,
financial
Siva.
report? So I'm looking at the comprehensive financial report and the balance sheet on, I think, page 51.
Okay.
And there was some significant swings. So Tina, if you could just highlight some of the drivers behind those swings.
Would you mind, just for reference purposes, just tell me the title, like on the very top of the page, because your PDF might not line up with my
Got it.
paper copy.
This is in the management discussion and analysis section.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm looking at the balance sheet, and it's the table says school district as a whole, assets, liabilities, and the net position.
Gotcha. Yeah, so don't forget when you, so 2 things. So that page right there in management discussion and analysis, that's taking all the funds of the district, general fund, all the other funds you have, pulling them together, and then also layering in your capital assets as well as your debt that you have issued and all the debt that you get allocated from the retirement system, okay? So when we report on that, that is a snapshot in time, June 30, 2021 compared to June 30, 2022. And so the way that things are gonna fluctuate is so if your current and other assets, which is really cash and receivables, if your cash balance is different today than it was a year ago, those are going to cause some of the fluctuations. Most often, so like here you can see capital assets went from 135.7 million at June of 21 to 171 million at June of 22. You've done a tremendous amount of building and construction, so that recognizes the investment that you've made there as of that point in time. So Does that kind of help with you?
Yeah, so I'm
Okay.
particularly questioning the liability shift.
Okay.
So I'm looking at pensions and OPEB and trying to figure out what caused that huge swing
Yeah, so
between
what
those two
that's
line
from,
items.
yeah, it's terrific swing, that's great. So what we're talking about here, let's talk about the pension liability. So that's your allocated liability from the state retirement system, and you get that reported to you. And so at June 30, 2021, that allocated liability was $206 million. At June 30, 2022, that allocated liability is $141 million. The reason for that substantial change is, one, there's contributions that are going into the system, but that happens every year. But most importantly is that investment return. As a result of the investment returns, which that plan is on a September year end, so as of September 2021, there was a 30% reduction in the liability as a result of investment returns. So I hope we get that again, because if you don't, that changes the liability and you'll see that swing back a year from now. But that's the big adjustment.
And so these are really the liabilities from the state pension plan.
That's correct.
And so how underfunded is the state pension plan today?
The total amount, I do not remember off the top of
No,
my
if
head, but it's
percentage-wise.
double-digit billions. And the expectation of when that plan will be fully funded is out in like 2028 and 2030. It might be even 2038. We can get you that number, but this is going to be there for a while.
Okay.
Here, it's on page 17 of the management letter that I advised everyone to read. In there, it says that there was a decrease of 30% over the last year, from 2000 to 2021, from $35 billion to $24 billion. But that was that's year-old data, and as Laura said, that number is going to be updated. Do you know when they actually come up with that number? It's as of September 30th, but how long does it take them to do it?
It gets issued generally in the spring, so spring of 23.
So it takes them 6 months?
Yeah.
Boy,
Yep.
okay, sort of like MSTEP.
They don't have the tight deadline that you have for reporting on that. So,
So it will go up because of the market returns, but, it was a $11 billion decrease for the whole state.
yeah, and we talk a lot about, if you want to do some quiet reading, in note 13 of your financial statements, there's a lot of information about the plan in its entirety, as well as the allocations that come specifically to the district.
Thank you.
As Laura said, in 2038, this past pension liability is going to be paid off, luckily, and I think it would be like $2 or $3 billion additional windfall to the school aid fund when that happens.
Thank you again for the opportunity
Thank
to
you.
be here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Todd, for the ESSER discussion.
There it is, thank you.
Hello, good evening. I'm here to brief you on this special report regarding ESSER 2. Thank you, Howard, for setting me up a little bit. Section 98C funding that has recently become available. And by doing so, we will be meeting some of the requirements needed to complete the application and to be eligible to receive the funding under this section. You might recall over the past couple of years that some of the ESSER funds have provided us with ample lead time, while others were ushered through at a rather quick pace. 98C is one of those that is moving quickly, but our finance team catches these opportunities in a rather skillful way. And 98C became available around late September, and to qualify for this funding, we must complete our application by the end of November. And as Tina suggested, present to the board no later than October 30th on ways that we can align these monies to address learning loss.
So Todd, let me understand. So 98C is not related to any of the categories that we were just shown. This is over and above any of the things that we just saw on this graph?
My understanding is that it's in a different fiscal year for funding. Did I answer that correctly, Tina?
That's what I'm trying, because like The equalization, the ESSER 3, has still $1 million for Bloomfield that we already have been approved. Is this 98C additional? Because
Yes.
98C and 11T obviously are different sections.
Yeah, so we've all heard about the state aid budget, the school aid fund, and the money being allocated, all in different buckets. So we're chasing a lot of these. MDE's working really hard to get applications out. This is a new pot of money.
Good.
It's still under the big ESSER 2 umbrella.
But it's not
That came to the
this.
state, but it's not included in there
Thank you.
at all.
That's all.
You know, I want to say it's about a couple $100,000.
I think it was 200,000.
200, okay.
200 that we're looking
Yeah.
for?
That we can qualify
In this,
for.
in
That would
this
qualify
section.
Do you know, Tina, do you have any idea how much 98C is in total for the state? Just to
Oh,
get
for
an
the
idea?
state, you know, I have that,
you-
but not off the top of my head.
Thank you. Okay.
There are a lot of numbers floating around.
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. It's not in, it is new monies. That's why it's coming along a little quickly. And the estimated amount right now, because application is also not complete, so you don't learn exactly what the dollar amount is, but you get an estimate and then you go through this
What gets so
process.
confusing is like that ESSER 3 can be spent through September 30th of 2023, which is the same timeframe, sounding like the 98C, but it is a different bucket.
Yep, so this 98C is a sliver within the ESSER 2 funds, and it comes with special requirements. And it is monies for programming options that support students that ESSER defines as low income, children with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and children in foster care. Until full funding allocation is known, however, some of these project elements that you're going to see that we're considering right now may still either be tentative, but we'll also have the opportunity to connect them with funding sources such as early literacy, 35A, other grant sources that our financial team is always monitoring, or perhaps general fund dollars. So the term I'm using for tentative doesn't necessarily refer to the program or our ability to offer it as tentative, but rather as we move through the grant and application process, it's tentative that it would be in this section. And we should be able to, working with our financial team, we'll be able to figure that out before that grant application is due. So here you're seeing a list of the requirements that go along with this particular 98C that we must be able to hit. And again, this particular slice of ESSER 2 funding has very specific criteria. As an overview, here are the areas that 98C will help support, which will primarily be in the areas of literacy, math, and development. Our MyKit process and ongoing analysis with regular progress monitoring also makes us eligible for 98C, and this includes the disaggregated data that we recently reviewed about a month ago, and will also be part of our future M-STEP, or future MyKit planning sessions. So here's a list of options that we believe are eligible under 98C. K-5 literacy footprints. This is a comprehensive guided reading program that provides explicit and systematic reading instruction in small group settings. That is also embedded within a workshop approach. It allows for differentiated instruction in areas such as phonemic awareness, decoding, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, and writing skills. We also have up here, which is an expansion on top of the literacy footprints. If we were to progress into the secondary level, we have expanding 612, or in grade 612, read 180. And this refers to expanding the pilot that was conducted in our special education resource rooms at our high school last school year into all secondary grades, 6 through 12. And doing so will equip our special education settings with resources needed to continue our skill building around those literacy components that I just discussed, and continue our focus in this area. It is really the secondary version of a K-5 approach as we continue to move students through learning progressions in the area of reading. Expanded before and after school offerings. This is a suggestion from our financial team that feels confident that there may be opportunities within 98C that can open up funding to offset some of the costs, such as math tutoring. You see that next on the list. Or perhaps materials for kids club and so on. We're still learning exactly what might be fundable under this, so this right now is a little bit fluid, but we expect to work with our financial team and figure out exactly how or what would be the best match within this funding source and other funding sources as well. And then finally, math tutoring at BHS. This might be starting as early as next week, and it will be offered Monday through Thursday from 3 to 4, and then again from 7 to 8 virtually later on in the evening. More details about this will be coming from the high school. I either think that information just went out or it will be coming out soon. And so families can watch for that, as well as our math teachers will be promoting that. And then finally, in conclusion, between now and this coming winter, people can expect for some of these programs to come online or these offerings, and we'll continue to have this available for our students. Our ongoing professional development will provide support as needed, while through our MyKit process, we will be able to progress monitor and evaluate the programs as they progress. Any questions? Yes, Howard.
Wait for the president. All right, Howard. Could you go back to slide 2 with the definitions? I'm a little confused in the way the first sentence is phrased from the state. To address learning loss among students, comma, and then a list of types of students or categories. Is the 98C to be used exclusively for low-income students, students with disabilities, et cetera, or is it to address learning loss among students, and that's just some examples, but it could be used for students that are not within these categories?
There isn't a limitation on the student population that the funds may be used for. Where ESSER equalization that you were asking about previously did have certain subgroups, many of these that are listed, where the funds had to be used within these subgroups. But for 98C, those are just including, but not exclusive.
Okay, thank you. But obviously, I think those students, low income, students with disabilities, English language learners, racial minority, they usually, or not usually, our statistics show, our data shows that they have significant lower achievement than other students. So I would hope that if we do get any funds, that it does focus on the students that have the greatest need.
Jennifer?
Did you say at the beginning you're estimating $200,000 from this grant?
Yes. It was just over that. I don't remember the exact number.
Okay.
And I believe because that's an estimate right now, and then as we work through that grant process, it starts to firm up. And then there's even, and then once you fill out that application, you receive feedback. So it's not really set in stone for a while. But we get a pretty good projected estimate. What we have here, typically what we would do for a grant that's moving along like this is make sure that we have more here than would fit within that grant to make sure that we can fully utilize 98C.
And I'm just wondering, the bullet 3 here, expanded before and after school offerings, is there consideration, and it sounded like the math tutoring might be in this format where our high school teachers or, even other levels of our schooling are going to adopt more of a schedule akin to IA where the teachers stay after more regularly? Is that something that's under discussion at all?
It is, but our math tutoring isn't contingent on whether or not that component will fit within that. And I believe the language is a little bit nuanced, so we're likely going to have to get feedback on that through the grant application process and then see if it qualifies when we receive that feedback from the auditors for that. So it's sort of like a, you get a definition of the language of usable dollars, and then we will submit an application for that. However, let's say if that categorical item is determined not as a good fit eligible under 98C, you don't lose the monies for that. Then you can repropose a different aspect within that. So And really, our finance team does an incredible job coming back and forth, working with our learning services team of keeping us up to date with how that's being monitored and audited. And then we try to work together seamlessly as possible to make sure that we're able to receive those dollars as quick as possible without it being too cumbersome.
Michelle?
Same slide. Can you hear me now? Will we be establishing any outcome metrics for each of these categories to determine whether or not we need to continue to sustain these beyond this one-time funding? And if so, could you explain? Like for instance,
I can respond to that, but I wasn't sure about the very last part of that question. To sustain the
so for
program-
instance, this is the dollar's $200,000, right? So this is
okay.
one-time funding, right? So once the dollars are gone, and if we found that these programs have great impact in our student development, do we have plans to continue the programs that have great outcomes for our students?
I feel like, is it okay if I respond? Okay.
That's what we do. We tag team.
You go
right?
first and I'll go
We tag
second,
team.
yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I would say we were concerned about a lot of the ESSER dollars going away. And knowing that they were one-time monies, many things went to help support our students during the pandemic years and last year, and thankfully the test score presentation you saw reflected a lot of the resources that were put towards student support and learning. And then we thought, well, now what's next? So we're seeing the school aid fund this year provide funds as well, and we always have to be cautious. And if something's really working, that is the tag teaming that Pat's cabinet team, and in particular finance and the learning services team do to identify what's working and what's not. This particular pot of money does have a requirement to actually have metrics and describe those metrics in the application by November 30th. So everything's not set yet. This presentation was first. I sort of wondered about the deadlines that they provided for this before we even have everything ironed out, but metrics are actually a part of what we have to describe in that application. And the total bucket is just over 52 million. I think you asked that question.
Paul?
If I could just expand on that real quick, Paul. Michelle, also what we did was we picked a couple areas, because even though professional development is in part in 98C, that's just a categorical item to help support the goals that you would put in there, but we selected a couple academic areas that we progress monitor quite regularly. And with those specific programs, we'll embed that into our MyKIP. So there will be not only that progress monitoring going on, but also a program evaluation to continue to look at those specific items that we were just listed. And then the other aspect to that too is sometimes with some of the initiatives, it's about getting a program in place. So although you're doing that, that is often sometimes, the expense is right up front. And then beyond that becomes a typical way that you're supporting that, because that is now in place. So some of the expenses on these items that you saw will be more upfront, and then we've secured that program and have it in place. Other than like the math tutoring, so you were right to zone in on that one, that continues to have a cost associated with compensation for that.
I guess the only thing that I guess I would have eventually liked to see is a tutoring option B K-12. I know that's not something we can provide now, as we've looked at some of the great outcomes with our students and their continued growth in that area. But I see that there is at least support for our K-5 and the literacy based on the data that we supported or was presented to us at the last board meeting. So I can appreciate that, but I would love to eventually see math support also K-12 as we do for literacy.
So just expanding maybe a little differently on Michelle's question. So we had these summer programs that, I'm not sure if we're going to continue, but what data do we have on those summer programs in terms of, the learning loss of the students before and the progression? Do we have any data on that?
Yes, we do have data that's available for that, but we don't have that compiled as of right now. I do know that that's something that we are looking at to be able to bring together, because we have the assessment data, the formative assessment data that we're gathering at the end of the year, and then we have all of our formative assessment data that we capture right up front in the year, so we would be able to pull that out. Problem is, with our information system, there's not an easy way to do that, so it's quite a cumbersome task, which is why it's taking a while to be able to put that data together, because all of the other components for the school year are also in place. Those items don't pause. So unfortunately, there's not like an easy way in the information data platforms that we have to be able to pull all of that in to say, okay, it would be great if you could just go in and say, okay, click on all the students that have that were in that summer programming, and then have that generate a report for you. Instead, we have to go in and be able to pull that out and reference that. So, but that's always something that we can look at. And we did get incredible feedback from the summer program, so we will be looking to. We may not always be able to offset the cost of that completely, but we are pretty confident that that is a program that's highly desirable, and so we would expect to continue to offer that. And in fact, if I remember right, Tina, I think we secured some of the funds that we should be able to offset that cost for next summer, but I can't remember the summer after, or is it we don't know about the summer after yet?
We may not know. I'd have to look.
Okay. So I think we were able to secure the funding for this coming summer, and I think we're not sure if we can do that for the summer after yet, but that's something that we continue to look into. Because you have these funding sources that you have to use in a specific criteria, and that seems to be one that was really successful. I can tell you just on a side note from that, whatever the academic information says, which I do know is likely positive, we'll be able to get that for the board at some time. Really, the intervention that I think was provided specifically after a couple years of students not being able to socialize. Learning is really a social endeavor. And the socialization that we are able to catch up on, so if you almost think of summer school in person as a prescription where, okay, for a few days a week, you're going to have a couple hours a day that you're going to be around other kids. And that really was probably one of the greatest benefits that we had in terms of being able to continue and expand on that socialization that's just a natural part of school, while doing that in a productive learning academic environment.
Just on that, right, obviously there's more in terms of, what happened. Did we send out a survey to those families after the summer program was over to get that additional feedback, or?
I don't recall that, but that's something I could look into to see if we have that. I don't recall.
Howard? Two things, and they'll be quick. One, the reason why I was asking for the total amount of the funding, $52 million, I did the math just now, and proportionally we are getting based upon our student count, a proper proportion of the funding at $200,000. It's about half of 1% of the total funding. We have about half of 1% of the total students, so that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I recently looked at the spreadsheet that had every district in the state on it, and kind of going through that proportionally as well, but I could not recall what the total amount was at the bottom of that spreadsheet.
And then to what Michelle was asking about related to tutoring, I totally agree, Michelle. I think this board should have an agenda item at some point and really talk about tutoring, whether tutoring, why do we need tutoring if if we've got great instruction, our students shouldn't necessarily need tutoring at all. But if they do need tutoring, who pays for that tutoring? Is that something that the parents pay? Is something that the district pays, or something the foundation pays? That's a discussion I think this board really should be having. K-12, or I wouldn't, not necessarily K, but certainly elementary school through 12.
So, I'm sorry, I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but just from a law, and this was the conversation we were having in June when we got the budget deficit projections, and we were, of course, concerned, and piggybacking on what you're saying, Michelle, about sustainability from a long-term financial stewardship point of view, which is one of the board's primary responsibilities. It's been challenging, like for me, to wrap my head around, okay, we just a couple of years ago, our budget has grown by, $8-9 million in just a couple of years. A lot of that was fueled by one-time money that's going to go away real soon. We had to implement all of these things to deal with the crisis, which were necessary, and everything we talk about with how we use the ESSER money is certainly desirable. But does that end up with more budget deficits, and how are we going to navigate that long-term? And can we, from a data, ROI, bang for your buck survey scenario, can we navigate which of these interventions, which of these programs, new, existing, are going to be the ones we should be allocating resources, because it doesn't look like we can pay for all of it with this one-time money going away, and now we're spending $103 million instead of $94 million before COVID.
Jennifer,
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why I think the next board should really start having the budget discussions similar to what we had about 8 or 9 years ago, where we started that discussion in February. And really, instead of waiting until May or June, when it's kind of fait accompli and it's all done, really having those discussions in the winter, month by month by month, and going through those ROIs and really working with the administration to see how we manage to stay within our revenues, because granted, we don't have the revenues coming from the state yet, but all those cost side of the piece that you're talking about, that's something that we really can look at ourselves.
Yeah. So
Yeah, there are a few of those, and academically speaking, in terms of programs, programs or offerings are generally not going to be the bulk of the way some of that money was used to respond to COVID as it was occurring. So some of those relief dollars help to offset sub-costs that significantly rose as people were out because they were placed in quarantine. We have staff members that are placed in quarantine.
Right.
So sometimes it's associated with costs that were temporary. At the time, we were because we couldn't hire a lot of teachers, extra teachers, to provide students with instruction if they were quarantined. So what we were doing is by working with union leadership, we came up with a stipend to help compensate teachers to work on their off time to support our kids that couldn't be in classrooms for a 10 to 15 day duration. So like that was in place while that was going along, which was responding to the quarantine while it was occurring. And then as that tapered off, now we no longer have that type of compensation structure in place. So with the programs that you were looking at today, the math would be something that would have a compensation structure. The other components are more of shaping, like we already have the staff, so we would mobilize staff in a different way or embed that into a program in a different way, but it wouldn't necessarily increase compensation for that. So when I say upfront dollars, it might be being able to provide the training and in order to capture the resources needed to be able to do those programs successfully. But then once you secure that and you have that training in place, now that is a sustainable structure where normally we wouldn't have adopted or we wouldn't have evolved this much or this quickly without those one-time monies. We would try to have leveled that out a little bit so that we're not spending in these areas so quickly. So in a way, we've been able to increase that support around instruction and classroom resources in new ways because it has been one-time monies that we've been able to associate and be able to respond to some of that learning loss or some of the risk factors that were in place.
And just to add more globally to what you're asking, especially from a budget standpoint, on our website, the Millage Transparency website, there's a chart that shows our fund balance, and our fund balance has been between 20 $121 million since 2017. Before that, it was 18.5, 19.4. So when you just look at the absolute dollars, because we look at a percent and we see the percents going down,
Right.
as soon as the revenue and expenditures, they're both going up. And a lot of it has to do with the pension. There's $9.3 million in revenue and in expenditures. And one of the years recently went up 1.5 and 1.7. That's significant. So when you look at the trend line, which is a chart that I do show usually during the budget, it looks like our revenue is going up, but it looks like our expenditures are actually going up too. So I purposely, in the board update, when I show all of this history, I'll have a column that says without pension. Now, if you ask...
Graph right here that we saw a few minutes
Yeah, if you ask me, you know, the pension cost, even though the state is funding a significant piece about, that is a cost of each employee. So I have no problem with that. But what it does, looking at historic trend and those that are more analytical, it throws it off. So between 20 and 21 million has been our fund balance since 2017, and before that it was lower than that. That gives me comfort when I look at the absolute dollars, because I know there are one-time monies that are coming off. I also feel good that we really have targeted those one-time monies towards one-time cost. And if there are, it allowed us to test and see what is working well, and we have to do that collaboratively with Pat, his whole cabinet team, and especially Learning Services, and a lot of the data that is presented to you periodically to see what is working best. And that is then where we want to target our resources and our dollars. When funds like this come up, like 98C, and that's the only reason we're doing this presentation now. We were, I think Learning Services planned to do something later, and we had to scramble for this deadline. But we want to put the dollars where there is the most value and where it's helping students succeed the most, all across the board. So right now, I feel really good about the state budget for this year and maybe next year, but we also always have to plan and look at that long-term forecast to see where we might be. So if that helps you at all, especially with some of that data, that helps me when I see that 20 to 21 million.
Thank you, and congratulations on the ongoing superlative financial stewardship of the district for you and your whole department.
Well, it's a team effort beyond our department. It really is.
And just really quickly, a couple things that I wanted to add to that. Like another strategy that we employed during COVID, you remember, if we had extra classroom space, we hired more teachers so that we could really lower the class sizes, because we felt strongly that that would keep us in person more often, or we would not have to quarantine a building or the district. So we're really trying to pull out of that hybrid model. And the amount of time that we spent in person was one of our #1 strategies, fighting against learning loss. And so being able to reduce those class sizes down, and then with the hope, and it looks like it's going to work out for us, that we weren't hiring beyond what a typical attrition rate, wouldn't it also help us correct course on. Probably one of the areas, and this happened within 4 to 5 months of the onset of COVID, and probably one of the primary ways that this board was future focused was moving after and going after that bond. The reconfiguration is probably the greatest strategy that you have right now in terms of fiscal stewardship and being able to really control costs, is with that K-8 configuration. That's probably one of the greatest strategies they have in front of you right now. We're just not in that configuration just yet, so we have another year to go. And so I feel like, you know, there are ways for us to move in a nimble way around that budget and be able to adapt to it in future years, more significantly than if we did not have this new configuration sitting right in front of us.
One final question. I swear, one final. And I've brought this up before, and I think I remember reading something in the audit report. Is there additional grant funding that's out there that we can go after as a district to help students, you know, with learning loss or other things as a result of the pandemic that we're currently seeking?
I think we're good. Yeah, I think we've got a lot of them.
Yeah, and actually, as quickly as we hear about them, and I have to say, that's a collaborative effort too. Yep, United Way came out with something, we were just approved for that. Oakland County was sharing, and so we had members of the Learning Services team apply for that. There's a matching requirement, so again, collaboratively finance, learning services, cabinet, where are we going to match from? What the finance team really does is really hone in on what all the requirements are so we can be compliant and figure out the most direct relationship to the cost we've decided are the most important and prioritize them to incur. And what is that tie, where does it tie easeless? Which bucket? So we don't burden learning services or anyone else that comes up with a grant on where it's charged. Once we know that's a priority and that's where resources should be spent, the finance team is really where the connection occurs. And I have to say, Karen Hildebrand has a very creative mind and has been very successful in the grant area.
Creative
as
accounting?
Part of the team. No, never creative accounting. Creative mind. So we can really maximize. We never want to lose any grant dollars that we're awarded. And sometimes it takes a tremendous effort.
As an example of it's not necessarily learning loss, but there's a security categorical that
There
you
is.
guys are going after.
Yep,
For
we-
some of the things that David's been talking
Security, mental health, the safety week we just had, that particular town hall also meets one of the requirements in those particular buckets. There are a lot of things still coming our way, so as we all struggle with capacity and competing priorities, we certainly do not complain when it's around additional funding to support our students.
But these categoricals do take a lot of work, not only putting it, actually writing the grants, but actually gathering the data to put together the grants to justify it to MDE.
Absolutely.
Some of them are slow moving and some of them are going by pretty quickly, and then you really have to go after it and be able to make sure that you secure that. But yes, Paul, there's things coming by all the time, and our finance team does a great job making us aware, and then we partner together to figure out how we can capture that. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tina.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, sure, you're up. 9A is the financial report. Do I- do we get it?
Typically, it's an accept and file, so the audit team already provided their presentation, and once you do the motion, the support, I just have a couple of comments.
Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education accept the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year 21-22 as audited and presented by Plant Moran.
Second.
And Tina.
So I just want to say, because it hasn't been mentioned yet, but that annual comprehensive financial report, it is very long. Not only the letter from the auditors, they're independent auditors, they work directly for the board. You get communications from them, you can call them if you have questions, concern. That is a very important independent element of that audit firm and the team that you saw today. The long comprehensive financial report has an introductory section that Laura Clays mentioned. And I just want to say that is a collaborative effort. Karen and I do not do that alone. That learning services, I reach out to every section you see, whether it's the farm, the nature center, the school buildings, high school, elementary, preschools, all of that had input from all of the leaders in those different areas. So at a minimum, for those that really don't enjoy numbers, that introductory section that's our opportunity without a lot of audit input to really brag about the district. So if you have any ideas of what you'd like to see in the next report, please share them with me, because that really is our opportunity to brag. The International Academy's in there, since we have the Oakma campus, so we just have a lot there. Statistically, that statistical information in the back often has 10 years worth of data, so that can help as well with some of the questions that I heard this evening. So I just want to thank everyone that had input, because it goes well beyond the finance team.
And I just showed Paul there are extensive organizational charts in there.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for those.
Thank you,
That
Tina.
was helpful.
Any discussion? Is this a roll call or?
No.
All right.
No,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Move on to board business 9B with Mr. Shulkin.
Hi, good evening. Well, before you is a request to award the bid for very sexy stuff called network switching, wireless, data center computing, and storage. Is there any questions?
In lay language?
Yeah, so you know how we connect to the network. So it's really, that's the big piece. So all those switches, like, you know, when you look in our tech closets, you see all those wires coming out? Those switches are what we're replacing across the entire district. And of course, our Wi-Fi system, most of those that were installed over the last decade, all of those are end of life, or the vast majority of the switching is end of life, and many of those access points are as well. Our data center, which includes our disaster recovery site as well. What this means is let's say we had a fire here, we could get the district back up in a matter of hours, days, maybe a few weeks if we had to, depending on the situation, at another site that we have. And so that backs up back and forth and also protects us a little bit from a little bit more cybersecurity best practices.
David, I know the technology is so complex and so many different pieces in the closets. Is this it, or are there other things? I know we've got the backbone and the wire, the WAN, but are there other elements that isn't included in this that will need to be updated over the next couple of years or in the bond?
The good thing about this will be
in the package that we got a number of years ago from Plant Moran, the 50-page or 60-page package, every building had IT pieces. Is this basically a summary of all that?
That is correct. And so think about that, those charts that you saw there, we're going back and replacing those pieces and adding or subtracting in some places, but not a ton of subtracting. I'll give you an example. So when you do think about our buildings that we're building out, for example, we're putting in new, say, PA systems that are going in. Those PA systems currently that are 50 years old are old analog, and they just connect to an amplifier, and they go out to these speakers, and you talk into it. Our new PA and paging systems that we're putting in are IP-based, meaning they connect with an Ethernet cable and they go to a switch. And that's just one thing. If you think over the years, access control, Jake's HVAC, all these things start connecting to the network. And we never had that kind of density or requirements. And so when you think about the bond, we have to add in places more switching where we might need it. And again, we are subtracting in a couple places, but in general, does that kind of answer your question?
So this is Series 1 spending, right?
Yeah.
Is there any significant IT in Series 2?
Yeah, so there's plenty of technology that'll be going on.
Like the control room back there.
Great
maybe
example.
It's a high school.
Yeah, you have, so think about, so you'll still have after
That's
this.
AV as opposed
Yeah,
to-
so you have those AV components that will still go on, and that includes our elementary buildings. It also includes our other buildings, so Wing Lake. Now, they don't have all parts of bond, but they'll have part of some refresh that'll be going on infrastructure-wise. And then you'll have Booth Center, physical plant services, on and on. So all of those pieces still need to come and those out, and they're kind of following construction. But network-wise, this is everything that we have for network.
Got it.
Correct. Now, like I said, you had mentioned something like our wide area network. We still have that work to do going on. And even if we ordered today, give you an example of supply chain challenges that we have, we would be a year out before we'd even receive those materials. So, got a lot of challenges ahead.
Is chip shortages impacting this?
Chip shortages and you just globally, shipping, those types of things are still a big challenge, and we're still hearing from our manufacturers. Some things have improved on the computer side, but things have not improved on the lower end side of the chipsets for us.
Do we have a motion?
I move the Board of Education award network and data center bid for the amount of $2,987,757.05, funded by the bond fund to People-Driven Technologies.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Sorry.
Thanks,
I got a tickle in
David.
my throat.
Thank you.
Next up is C, bid pack 6, and Mr. Wills is approaching.
Good evening, and with me this evening is Mr. Alan Dresselhaus, also with Plant Moran Cressa. We're going to talk about fun stuff such as concrete, masonry, carpentry, floor tiling, etc. This is really a continuation from bid pack 5, which was approved by the board. back in February of roughly $15 million. What you'll see tonight is the bid pack 6 is a culmination of a lot of the work at Conant and Way, so a lot of the interiors pieces, as well as some other district-wide stuff of just over $11 million. These do fall within the total $29 million programs. So again, I'm going to let Ann go a little bit to the bidding coverage and some of the specifics, but we just continue to do a great job. Bart Mel just does a great job getting ahead of the curve with bidding. Here in October, we're beating the curves of November, December. We are seeing a little bit of cost leveling out, so some of the mechanical units, electrical equipment are starting to come down a little bit, which is great. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Dresselhaus. We'll cover bid pack 6.
Prices are coming down?
Leveling, not coming down. So, yes.
Good evening, Board. Good to see you again. I just want to take a minute to walk you through bid pack 6 so you have understanding of exactly where we're spending these dollars. As Mr. Wills indicated, we have approximately $10.7 million in construction activity, and then we have another $600,000 roughly in sinking fund, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But with respect to the bid pack 6, and this is phase 1 of the bid pack, we are spending money at Conant with renovation of the special education spaces. We are renovating the existing gym, turning it into a music center and music room. And this bid pack also includes some site work improvements at Way and Conant. Moving on to Way, this pack includes renovations of the special education spaces, the existing gym, which is turning into an ingenuity lab. Moving on to Hills East, this includes renovations of the kindergarten classrooms. At West Hills, we have renovation of the kindergarten classrooms, as well as the shop is turning into art rooms. At South Hills, this bid pack includes the landscape package and locker replacements. And at North Hills, we have the landscape package as well as the tennis court improvements. With that, in the sinking fund, as I alluded to, the $600K is included for $225,000 for new lockers that is coming out of sinking fund, and $226,000 roughly for masonry repairs that are mostly at Conant and Way, tuck pointing and brick replacement. So again, we are asking for board approval for $11.3 million of spend, all of which is budgeted and has been accounted for in the bid packages here.
I think it's also to point out that all this work will be completed before the fall of '23 as well. So that's part of that reconfiguration of the K-5s at both the new East Hills, or Eastover at East Hills and Lone Pine at West Hills. So
I just have one general question. Do we know what percentage of the individuals that actually were able to receive the bonds are Michigan-based companies?
I double checked, but I believe every single one of them is a Michigan-based company. So again, we didn't see any from outside of the Michigan base, at least for a supply house or a labor house piece. So great question.
I guess my question, what is the process, the bid process? I mean, there's a lot of bids on here, so what's the process? How many bid? What do you look at, high level?
Yeah, so French Associates, they'll actually, going back in time, they meet with the principals, the user groups. We incorporate Mr. Shulkin from technology, Mr. McDermott from the facilities operations side. We actually presented, I think, kind of design development updates to the board. They actually go out and put up on Sigma, which is the district's mandatory for state projects. Also on the district's website. We push it out to Construction Association of Michigan, CAM, Engineering, Dodge reports. So the good news is in every single bid credit, we had a minimum of 3 bidders, with the exception of playgrounds, which we're going to rebid and bring back at future board meetings.
Yep.
But to have 3 to 5 bidders in every single category is phenomenal. We hear a lot. I know last week we were at MASB. We heard some districts not even getting electrical bidders, and they're like, well, I'm going to be a month or 2 behind schedule. Guess what? Those costs escalate. So again, kudos to French to keep on the schedule. More importantly, kudos to Pat and your administrative team for making quick decisions, and ultimately for the board to make decisions that approve these bids.
And just on that decision, is there like a rubric that you guys use? How do you decide 3 bidders, 5 bidders, who ultimately gets it based on what criteria?
Yeah, again, Bart Mel is the largest construction manager in Michigan, if not the Midwest, and they send it out to hundreds upon hundreds of supply chains, contractors, prime contractors, et cetera. They actually pick up the phone and start calling a lot of the people here in Southeast Michigan. So It's not just hit the send button, hope to get bids. It's actually a lot of legwork that's done behind the scenes, again, with Bart Mellow's engineering team, obviously with French and some of our assistants are reaching out to some others above and beyond Sigma or the district's website. But again, just to have 3 to 5 plus bidders is a huge success. So.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I guess my question was, when you get the 3 to 5 bidders, what's the process to decide
Oh,
on
I'm
who-
sorry.
on each of them?
Yeah, so what you have is what's considered to be the lowest responsible bidder. So they usually interview 2 to 3 of the low subs to look at financial viability, adhesion to schedule, adhesion to specifications. They actually go through to make sure it's a complete bid, something's not missing. So what you'll see in the majority of those contracts is that is the lowest bid, is the one that's being recommended. There might be a handful where they did miss a major scope of work. Oh, I forgot the edging on the roof. Well, that's a non-qualified bid, so it gets rejected. So that is the process. It gets interviewed by Bart Mel, French, the district, and our team. So it's a few days of a lot of interviews, but at the end of the day, we feel very good about schedule, inclusion of scope, and obviously the price, which fits within the budget. So.
But you're also looking at the quality of the bidder.
Yeah, so there was a situation, I think, last year in early bid pack, they did not perform with the district in previous work.
Not just lowball the
Correct.
number and then you get a surprise, or field orders afterwards.
So how when could we get the dash updated, reflecting the bid
Tonight?
numbers incorporated in them?
Yeah, so actually, we just talked about that. So we're meeting with Tina and Karen from the financial standpoint, looking at the second series, or the 2A series that was provided, which actually is a lot of this work to continue. So our thought is here very quickly, probably in the December timeframe, to have that fourth quarter dash update. We would want to talk about contingency, so we're still tracking very good. So that kind of ties into that whole sinking fund, future project type discussion of your total 10-year capital plan. So actually, we did send the updated dashboards to Karen for August, September. October will obviously include this type of increase. So again, you'll see that barometer. The fact that you've already approved over $120 million of work out of a $200 million is pretty impressive. So again, just kudos to the board for making quick decisions.
Because I know if we do, and I think we talked about this, if we do accelerate, a lot of this, we will save money on the back end in terms of fees for Bart Mallow. So are we looking to accelerate?
We see fees across the board. I mean, it's, again, you're going to avoid additional escalation, material pricing, potential soft costs. So again, that's something that we had a meeting of how to try to accelerate as much as possible, and French has been able to keep up, which is great. So they're already drawing projects that were potentially in 25 that we'll look for in the fall of 23 and spring of 24. So more to come.
I think that's why I asked my question. I think it's great that we're, not that, there was any kind of like rationales that lean that way, but
Keeping the work at home.
I love that there's a great diversity in the location and the organizations that are represented in this work. So,
Just FYI, Bart Mallow does tend to favor, all things being equal, union workers and green companies, which are also important to me.
I just think it's important for us to acknowledge it,
Yep.
and so thank you for that.
I think there's some legal requirement as well.
Definitely. Well, I said like encompassing all of that, it's just great to see Michiganders.
I mean, all of these bids are Michigan-based companies looking at the report.
Howard?
I know there's a great scope of that. I think we should just acknowledge it.
I'm not sure whether it's a question for you guys or for Tina, but what determines what goes in the sinking fund versus what goes against the bond?
Great question. So we always go back to those blue scope sheets. And again, that was the definition. That's kind of our target of what's included. So everything that you see in the sinking fund was while we're there, it's not part of the bond proceed or bond initiatives. So for instance, lockers originally was, we should just electrostatically paint them. Jake took it, he's like, you know what, if we're doing this right, we might as well just do it right. So that's why it's a sinking fund project and not necessarily a
So
bond
it's not a financial aspect of it, didn't qualify as the definition of a bond versus sinking fund. It's more of a added starter, something we hadn't thought about originally. Now, we do have possibly room within the bond because of some of the things you're going to be talking about in the next meeting. So it's possible some of this, I'm not sure whether it's preferable to put it in the bond or put it in the sinking fund, but it's not a financial issue. It's more of, it wasn't in the original bond, but now that we have favorability in the bond, it could be potentially put there.
We're just trying to stay true to those blue scope sheets as bond, and then again, leave it up to the administrative team, ultimately the board, to say, hey, this is outside of that scope. So we'll talk about that in future projects as what could also potentially be.
So we'll have that conversation for the next month or two. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I moved Board of Education award bid pack 6 to district-wide renovations to the bidders listed below for approximately $11.3 million as part of Phase 1. And I'm not going to go through all of them because this agenda is posted publicly, so the public can read it.
Thank you.
The link to it, yeah. And it will, and listing them by number gives no more transparency about what the projects are, in my opinion, so
It's
we'll
all
skip them.
It's all on our website. Yep. And the agenda's on the website.
It's $11,349,588. It's in the.
Is that second? Sorry.
I second.
Oh, okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. We could be here till 10 or 11 o'clock at night.
Okay, moving on to D, which is the second reading and approval of board policy updates. If you recall, we've gone over this a couple of times. We made the decision to leave out the one item. I'm not sure how it ended up reading.
Let's put it on, let's make the motion then, because I think that there
Okay.
might be some discussion about it. so.
All right. Do I have a motion?
I move the Board of Education approve the changes to board policy as presented and as recommended by legal counsel, with the exception of Board Policy 0003, Superintendent of Schools, which will remain as is and will be further considered by the Board of Education at a future meeting. I move the Board of Education update Board Policy 1002, meetings of the Board of Education, to adopt the guidelines outlined in option B as presented by legal counsel, which provide for remote participation of board members.
Second.
Discussion?
So I just wanted to clarify, in the first part of that motion, Board Policy Section 0003, I just had to double check it. Specifically, what we were talking about is an administrative regulation, so it doesn't, and we are not required to approve administrative regulations. So I think because we're referencing it under policy, that was the board policy that most closely aligned with the actual administrative regulation that's being tabled, which is a discussion about board approving the collective bargaining team prior to collective bargaining. So in other words, it didn't align directly with policy, it aligns with administrative regs. So I think because we don't approve those, but we do approve policy, 0003 was the closest one, if that makes sense. No? Okay.
So it's-
That is part of the policy.
Right, it says
It is policy, I
14.01,
think.
and then in the motion, it references 0003.
Yeah, because I believe the specific collective bargaining reference came from administrative regulations.
It is I mean, what we're talking about is
It's
policy
still policy.
0003.
Right, I mean, but if you look through policy 0003, it doesn't specifically talk about the collective bargaining team.
So
Yeah, it
just-
does.
just-
Oh, it does?
Yeah,
Oh,
second
sorry.
paragraph.
At least the purple, I'm looking at page
Right.
2, I think, in the
Okay.
purple.
Yeah, that was,
Yeah,
So we're
sorry, my
appro-
numbers are off.
so we're-
I had a different number for it,
right, so we're
so ignore that then.
we're approving everything except the change
Yeah.
to
That change,
0003.
right.
Okay, that's what we,
So the
okay.
first paragraph of this section, we are approving the change. Is that correct?
Per the resolution that I just read, we are not touching 003. We're leaving it the way it is, and we're kicking the can down the road.
Both paragraphs?
Yep, the whole,
Okay.
that whole between the, where it says introduction, where it says update, put it this way, update 14.01. We're not doing that.
Okay, well, I didn't think we had any further things to do with the first paragraph, but if we need to keep it intact because it's one chunk of the policy, I understand.
Howard.
All right, different issue. Option B. Totally agree with the concept, but as I read it more carefully, and it's a full page of stuff. First, some definitions. To participate remotely is different than to remotely contribute. Okay? Does everyone sort of understand the difference between the two after you read it?
No.
All right. So to participate remotely is in OMA, and you can only participate remotely and be included in the quorum and vote if you are either military or have a permanent disability. So that's part of the new OMA. But option B gives us the ability to remotely contribute. Both have the word remote, but one has to participate and the other is to contribute. To contribute is we can be on the tube or Zoom and we can listen, we can talk, we can ask questions, we can contribute. We can't be part of the quorum and we can't vote. Okay?
I think the distinction you're looking for is not participate and contribute, but contribute as opposed to vote.
Well, I'm reading option B, and it talks about participate remotely in a meeting, and then later it talks about to may remotely contribute. Anyway, so the question that I've got, though, is the last sentence in the first paragraph. It says, additionally, if any board member is present remotely due to reason explicitly authorized by OMA or as a reasonable accommodation for disability, no other board member may remotely contribute to the board meeting unless they are present remotely due to military duty or reasonable accommodation for disability. So that sentence is saying, and again, this doesn't really affect us currently because no one's in the military and no one is got a disability. But if we did have someone who had a disability remotely, this second sentence would preclude us from being able to participate remotely. I'm trying to understand why that sentence is there. Why do they make this distinction?
Doesn't it mean that you can only have one board member who's remote?
No.
Excepting if another board member is in the military or has a disability, then they can also be remote.
Not the way I read it.
That's not what it's saying?
Not, if you can, pull it up and you read it yourself.
Right, so what page are you looking at?
Yeah.
I'm on page 5 of the Miller-Johnson, option B, and it's the last sentence in the first paragraph.
Can I share?
Yeah.
Documents are all-
Sorry, there was two people talking at once.
Page 5,
Okay.
for, option B is the heading.
Yes.
First paragraph, last sentence, starting additionally.
I think it does conflict.
Well, it's not that it at least, well, I'll let you read it. It's not that it conflicts, it's an additional requirement that basically says if you have this happening, you can't remotely contribute. We would not be able to have, if someone was in the military and was overseas, no one here, according to my understanding of the sentence, could then, if they happen to have a cold or in a business trip, they could not zoom in per that sentence. But I'm trying to understand why. What's the difference? I mean, why make that distinction?
Maybe they're trying to protect quorum. This is such a remote outlier of something that's never going to apply to us. I
agree.
don't think we have to fuss over it.
Okay. I'll kick the can down the road to the next board.
OMA does not give any express permission for a remote attending board member to vote.
True.
Except military
And
or
disability.
disability. Okay. We have an administrative regulation supported by our Attorney General that expanded what previously was the post-COVID OMA and allowed board members to participate remotely under a more expansive definition of disability and medical issue.
I want to vote. I'm going to vote for option B.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Whether you can vote or not, we got an opinion from our attorney saying it's not clear whether remote participation means can you vote. It only is clear in 2 instances. Is it clear in other ones? It's not. It doesn't mean you can or can't. What I was saying in our last meeting is we, as a board, could put that in our own board operating procedures. Remote participation of non-military, non-disability qualifying board members means voting privileges, or conversely, doesn't. That's not part of this particular policy. It's part of an amendment or addition to the BOP, and we can do that.
All right. This is allowing people to remotely participate.
Correct.
Or remotely wrong word.
Those are
wrong word.
synonymous,
Remotely contribute, which means they're-
Participate and contribute, I think, are synonymous.
No,
But wait,
per this, they're not.
contribute or participate are different than vote. They are,
Contribute through a chat, though. That's a remote contribute.
but we don't enable
Exactly.
a chat.
But I'm just specifying, a remote contribution can also be to make a note in the chat to say, I vote yes.
So
That's
we-
still a remote contribution, so I want to just.
They
put
just
it out
seem to
there.
I just want to make sure that Lisa understands the first sentence, which I did not read. A board member must be physically present at the meeting to be counted towards a quorum or vote, except, and then they go through this, participate remotely. So to participate, or to be part of the quorum or to vote, you either have to be in the room or have one of those 2 exceptions. To remotely contribute is another outside of that.
But you said participate and vote.
No. You have to participate remotely gives you the ability to be part of the quorum and vote. But if you are remotely contributing, meaning you're not in the military, you're not have a physical disability, but you are on a business trip, you've got a flu at home, something like that, you know, whatever, you're taking care of a loved one at home, that is remotely contributing, and you can contribute, you just can't vote, and you can't be part of the quorum, so the vote would be 6-0.
Here's
Or
my
it would be 6
question.
people voting, not 7.
Here's my question real quick. Are we confusing this, and Lisa help me here, I'm asking you kind of more specifically, but what it's saying is you have to meet all these conditioned bullet points in order to vote. But if you are just merely contributing, you don't have to meet all of these bullet points, but you can't vote. So in order to vote, you have to tell the president, send out a communication to the community, blah, 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 blah. If you don't do all those things, then you can contribute remotely. You're merely contributing remotely, but you're not voting.
The bullet points are sort of procedural. That's not, the primary thing is that first paragraph. The second paragraph is more of a Rebecca piece.
Look at the
that
footnote,
Just making
though.
sure, yeah, they're just making sure you dot the i's and cross the t's.
Right, but read the footnote.
Okay.
At the bottom
So
of the page.
the question, all right, the question is that under circumstances, let's just say if someone's sick or on a business trip and they're participating, Do they have to be in the military or have a disability to be able to vote?
Yes.
Is-
To be able to vote,
Kevin,
yes.
I
Yeah.
think, I mean,
So
let's.
that's my,
But you can
Well,
contribute, you can
That's what I'm
listen.
saying, right?
According to
Questions, you just
OMA,
can't vote.
I think Kevin's advice was understand the law and that it's incredibly strict, and make your own board policy and be aware of what you're doing.
so Kevin's advice is up to current or future boards to decide whether that remote person can decide, the board will have to decide whether that remote person will be voting or not.
I think they can. I think
Well, I'm
he
just saying, I'm not
said-
saying that's
I
up
think
to-
he said we have to make that decision with our eyes open to any potential liability that could pose.
Yep, okay.
If-
that's it.
But that's not what what we're voting on does not say that.
And that's
Now,
why
if you
I
want
got
to
my
go,
hand up 5 times, because there's nothing in here that says you can't vote. And I've already stated that.
What?
There's nothing in here that says that you cannot participate in voting. But I
If you're
wanted to.
if you're remote?
It does not say that. But my question.
the first sentence says that you can't. Read the
What?
first sentence. You must be physically present except, and then it lays out 2 exceptions.
It says or vote in the meeting. Okay, well, whatever works. But my question is.
For quorum or to vote.
But my question is not even that. My question, because that was Paul, I just was helping Paul real quick. My question goes to the point where, when my hand was up and I just decided to engage into your conversation. The part where Howard is specifying, from what I'm reading, it indicates that you can't have 2 people remote. So if someone's out remote, then if I have a disability, I can't be out remote? So you can't have more than one person participating remotely?
I think it does mean that, and I think it means the person with the disability or military exemption would take precedence. They would be a full voting member. And then if that is happening, then you can't have a second person who's remote also.
Correct. And it might be a moot point for our current situation, but this is sort of in the future as a what if.
But I think it removes, at least, what I'm really trying to understand is when we have a person that may be a caretaker, now they can't participate remotely because they're not the person that has the disability or need the accommodation. So I'm wanting to see if that's the or that should be there, or should that part change? I'm not the lawyer at the table, so I don't really.
My understanding is option A is straight from the OMA. So that's the only one that our legal services can guarantee is OMA compliant. The option B is gray areas that never was defined by the OMA. So it really is up to the board to interpret it. And then if challenged and we misinterpreted it, not intentionally, there's no fine. Only intentional lack of obeyance of OMA gets a reprimand or fine. So if we in earnest don't interpret it correctly, there is no penalty. So, I mean, evidence by having a discussion around this table, it's clear that we're not intending to violate anything. It's just a gray area right now because it's brand new. That said, if board members are participating remotely, yes, I except for in the two OMA situations, disability and military, then the board president has to, notify the community, all the bulleted points. Anything beyond that, it isn't defined. So that's why I said, Howard, we can put it in board policy or not, depending on what we decide. Do you want to let non-military, non-disabled qualified participants vote? Yeah, no one said yes or no yet. It's brand new. So until that's determined, it's up to the board. And I think that if ever there was a time to take a risk and do it, it's before we have, before we know for sure what the law is, because it's an honest guess at what we think is OMA compliant to the best of our ability.
I probably should not have brought up that additionally, that last sentence. It just was an interesting situation, but it doesn't apply really to us at this point. I mean,
Well,
I'd say we call the question and vote on it at this point.
Here's what I think is a typical situation, right? One person needs, or maybe more than one board member may need to participate remotely with good reason. Again, we talked about that last time, about what would be good reasons up to the board to decide.
True.
So is it, I didn't feel like coming to a meeting, not a good reason. I'm working late, not a good reason. I'm sick, good reason. Whatever, decide.
I'm on a
Put it in the
business trip,
policy.
I got a
Yeah,
sick
that's all I'm saying. It's
spouse.
up to
You've
the board
already
to decide.
applied this arbitrarily to me in the past year, 3 times, in different ways.
Right.
Right?
'Cause we-
So let's just make up our minds and put it
That's what
in
I
the
think.
BOP and be done with it. The law is not caught up, and the law is standing in its own way. The law is an intention of transparency, and there is nothing untransparent about one remote board member on camera filling out the postings, stating where they are. Remember where I said exactly where I was, this hospital, this street, this city, this state, and there's nothing untransparent about that. So I don't see why that person should not be
Yeah.
voting, and I don't think the community would appreciate letting this outdated law get in the way of us
That's
doing our
really
business.
well said.
I call the
Really well
question,
said.
guys. I think we all agree. I hope we all agree.
I don't agree.
But I think what warrants further discussion, and maybe not, this calendar year, but down the road, is what parameters, if any, you want to place around this. I don't think it's fair to have the same 4 people constitute a quorum and have to show up when other people, when there are no defined parameters as to what
Yeah, the
permits remote
parameters
In a
participation.
sense,
have to be-
what you're saying, I think, is we should have, like they have at school, an acceptable excuse, and an unacceptable or excuse absence.
Right.
There you go. And if it's
I
unexcused
mean,
absence,
yeah.
then we, the board, through the BOP, would have to define what
I think
excused
the overall
absence is.
objective of the OMA is to be transparent. We have the technology to be able to do that and allow us to be inclusive and let a board member with good reason participate remotely. We have two-way visual and audio communication. It's reliable, it's transparent, it's inclusive. I see no reason why not to allow it personally. It allows flexibility, except for the reason that was mentioned last time, if it's abused, because it's overly permissive.
I agree.
Well, I think the president, it's up to the president at that point to say, yes, this passes the smell test or not.
Or
I
they can
think
put it in the BOP,
Yeah,
but
but to
reason A, B, C.
foreseeing that the BOP may not be able to cover every single scenario that could occur, we should leave it to the president to
See whether it's
make
being
that
abused.
final decision.
I mean, I think option B is pretty clear. I don't know that we're all reading it in the same way necessarily today, but it does clearly say that if you are out for any other reason besides the ones that are statutorily listed, that you can't vote.
True.
Yeah,
You
it
can
does say,
contribute,
it does say
right.
that.
I agree.
It does,
So you can
it
contribute, I
definitely
think,
says
and then
that.
we'll address it as it comes up, and maybe adjust the BOP, but I think option B
It did
is
later
fine for
say,
now.
it's possible you could vote, although I don't know the practical need for it, as long as you weren't the determining vote in the quorum. So if you can't be.
You can't
it's
even be a part of the
3-3,
quorum.
and
Like, if there's a-
I wasn't reading it, I mean, there was another sentence that was,
I was already told that was not.
And I was thinking along, if you had a 3-3 vote and someone was remotely contributing, I would hope this board would say, let's defer that vote until the next meeting. And we've done this a few months
But
ago.
why
when
would it
everyone can
matter,
be in the
though?
room.
I mean, that's what I want to know.
I
Why-
Clearly says- so
Why would it matter?
Read the second to last paragraph,
I
or the
can't,
second to last sentence
this
in the
piece of
paragraph.
paper is written in circles, and
Right.
it gives me a
Because
headache.
Let
right
me
now,
read
the
it.
law
Yeah.
is pretty
Let me read it.
explicit
So
in terms of who can
it
be a
it
quorum.
says everything about the, specifically exempted people prior. And then it says, however, and then it goes on to say, if you're not one of those people, you can participate remotely. However, any such board member may not be counted towards a quorum or vote in such meeting.
Pretty clear.
That's it.
That's the law.
That's clear. Right?
Now,
That's what it
contributing in
says.
terms of, just being able
So-
to
I mean,
comment.
the law technically says you can't contribute
the
remotely,
question yes or
period.
no?
So if you want to be technical
Well,
about
I
it.
mean, So it's gray there,
If you're
but
going to stretch it, you may as well let them vote, is what I think, but hey.
I just want to my only point was just making sure we know that.
well, this is what the other
Those
lawyers
are
said.
the lawyers,
you know.
that's the
That's-
same.
Can we have Michelle have the floor, please?
I just want to make sure we all understand that there's no more than one person can be remote unless you have the exemption. This is what,
Well,
We're-
no,
we're-
I mean, down the road, there may be somebody
no,
in the
no, no,
military,
no.
and there may be
Well,
somebody
military
who's
is
disabled.
okay. Disabled
So-
is okay. But if I'm a caretaker and Paul's a caretaker, we can't both be remote. And it says that. So I'm just trying to make sure we understand
Well,
it.
well, the second.
No more than one person. It does say that.
Well, the second sentence says, board members, plural, who are not explicitly authorized under OMA to participate remotely in the meeting, blah, 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 may contribute remote to board meetings.
Yes,
So it
because-
says board members.
Because the two people could be a military person and a person caring for their family members. So that's why there is a plural. But the additionally states that if I am out, you can't be out because you're a caretaker,
Well-
unless you have a disability or you're in the military. That is what that
The
says.
explicitly authorized are
Let
those
me-
two situations. The military is explicitly authorized.
If any board member is present remotely due to a reason explicitly authorized by OMA or the reasonable accommodations
Right.
for disability, no other board member may remotely contribute to the board meeting unless they have these conditions
Right.
met.
Correct.
So that means that I can contribute remotely, but you cannot unless you are military or disability.
Right. So that's going to be the same under option A or option B.
Right.
So it doesn't, just so we, I mean, that's fine, but it doesn't really matter to which choice you make. That's,
No, I just wanted, I wanted to make sure we weren't making, there's no, I understand that, but
I would
that
say-
to me, when I read it, I said, oh, okay, wow, that means that no two of us can be out unless this issue.
I
think
would
that's
say
an
that we vote on this the
interpretation.
way it is written.
It's
and-
not actually in the statute itself. So if another lawyer interprets it a little bit differently, it's not a right or wrong, it's just a different interpretation.
I would suggest that,
How is there a different interpretation? I don't.
But this
that's
is
not
our
the law.
lawyer's synopsis, it's not what the statute itself says.
But if we approve this, are we interpreting this approval? I don't,
Well,
how do I
that's-
interpret
and
this
that's what I was gonna
differently?
say.
If this is what we approve, then it's not
Let's-
the lawyer's interpretation.
well, let's approve it the way it is. And when that situation occurs, that if we have two people that want to do remote contributing, we then have Rebecca call the lawyer and
Sorry,
talk to him
Rebecca.
and figure out exactly how we handle that situation at the time. But let's approve it as it is, guys. Move on.
Okay.
9:30.
Okay, so we are agreeing, just to be clear, that the entire section 003 is not being voted on, both
Correct.
paragraphs?
Correct.
Okay.
correct.
Do we make the motion
So,
already?
well, the motion has
We
been
did
made
make a
and
motion
seconded.
And
Okay.
seconded, and we had a long discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1. Oh, meeting's adjourned.
I call for adjournment.
Thank you.
You know, it's just a bad, it's brand new, it's a